I first saw the name Hollow Creek at 2:17 in the morning. It appeared on the corner of my computer screen with a soft notification sound that barely cut to the hum of the office air conditioner. I almost ignored it. Most overnight death calls weren't unusual. Heart attacks, farm accidents, elderly people passing in their sleep. But Hollow Creek caught my attention because I hadn't heard that town's name in years. The county map still showed it, but barely. A tiny near the northern edge of the county. Population, maybe 12 people, maybe less. The kind of place that slowly died without anyone officially declaring it dead. I rubbed my eyes and opened the report. Male, approximately 70 years old. Found deceased in side residence. No obvious signs of foul play. Caller requesting county coroner response. Simple enough. Still, something about it bothered me. Maybe it was the time. Maybe it was the town. Or maybe it was the fact that the caller had left no contact number. Just an address. Nothing else. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than I should have. Then I grabbed my coat and headed for the parking lot. Outside, the night felt colder than it should have. The sky was clear. The moon hung low above the empty road. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat and started driving north. The highway was empty. No headlights. No traffic. Just miles of dark farmland stretching in every direction. For the first 30 minutes, everything felt normal. Then I passed the old Miller grain silos, and my GPS lost signal. The screen froze. The route disappeared. A few seconds later, the entire display went black. I frowned. The unit wasn't old. That had never happened before. I tapped the screen. Nothing. The road ahead seemed darker somehow. Not physically darker, just heavier, like the darkness had depth. I rolled down my window. Slightly. Cold air rushed inside. The smell hit me immediately. Wet dirt, old wood, rain. But it hadn't rained in days. I looked at the sky again. Still clear. Not a cloud anywhere. The smell lingered anyway. I kept driving. 20 minutes later, I saw the sign. Welcome to Hollow Creek. The letters were faded, almost white. The wooden posts leaned sideways. One side of the sign had collapsed completely. Beyond it sat a cluster of buildings barely visible beneath the moonlight. Most looked abandoned. Dark windows. Sagging roofs. Empty streets. It felt less like entering a town and more like stepping into a memory. I slowed near what used to be the main street. Several storefronts stood empty. A diner, a hardware store, a gas station. All closed. All silent. Then I noticed something strange. Lights. A few houses still had lights on. Not many. 3, maybe 4. Tiny islands of life surrounded by darkness. The address led me toward the edge of town. A narrow dirt road curved between dead trees. Their branches twisted overhead like black fingers. Eventually I spotted the house. A small white farmhouse. One porch light glowing. Everything else dark. I parked beside an old pickup truck. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. For a moment I sat there, listening. Nothing. No insects. No wind. No distant dogs barking. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I stepped out. The porch boards creaked beneath my boots. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately. An elderly woman stood there. Thin, gray hair, sunken eyes. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "You the coroner?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped aside. "He's in the bedroom." No introduction. No explanation. Just those words. I followed her inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and old books. The wallpaper peeled from the walls. Family photographs covered nearly every surface. As we walked down the hallway, I glanced at them, and something felt off. Every picture showed the same people, the same faces, over decades, birthdays, weddings, graduations, funerals. Nothing strange about that, except no one seemed to age correctly. A woman who looked 40 in one photograph appeared exactly the same 20 years later. A teenage boy appeared unchanged in images separated by decades. I slowed. The elderly woman noticed. "Old pictures," she said quietly. Then she kept walking. The answer felt rehearsed, like she'd given it before. We reached the bedroom. The deceased lay on top of the bed, hands folded neatly across his chest. At first glance, he looked peaceful, almost asleep. I checked for the usual signs: body temperature, skin discoloration, pupil response. Everything appeared consistent with natural death, but then I noticed his expression. His eyes were closed, yet his face looked terrified. Not pain, not suffering. Fear, pure fear, frozen there, as if he'd seen something moments before dying. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. The woman stood silently behind me, watching, not grieving, just watching. "How did he die?" I asked. "His heart." "Doctor confirmed that?" "No." I looked up. "Then how do you know?" She hesitated, a little too long. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "Because that's how they all die." I turned toward her. "What do you mean?" But she simply looked past me toward the window, toward the darkness outside. He was the last one. The room seemed colder suddenly. "Last one of who?" She didn't answer. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house. I glanced toward the hallway. Nobody there. When I looked back, the woman was still staring at the window. Her eyes looked distant, lost, like she was remembering something she wished she could forget. I finished documenting the scene, took photographs, recorded notes, asked routine questions. Most received vague answers. The longer I stayed, the more uncomfortable I became, not because of the death, because of the town, because every answer felt incomplete, like everyone knew something they weren't saying. When I finally prepared to transport the body, the woman stopped me at the front door. "Don't stay after sunrise." I blinked. "What?" Her expression never changed. "Leave before sunrise." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I thanked her and carried my equipment outside. The body was loaded into the vehicle. Paperwork complete. Job finished. Or at least it should have been. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I noticed movement. Across the street, someone standing near an old mailbox. A man, tall, motionless, watching the house. The moonlight revealed almost no details, just a silhouette. I stared for several seconds. He never moved, never waved, never stepped forward, just stood there, watching. A strange uneasiness settled in my chest. I started the engine. The headlights swept across the road. For a brief second, they illuminated the figure, and my breath caught. The man's face looked identical to the body lying in the back of my vehicle. Then the headlights shifted, and he was gone. Just empty road. Nothing there. I slammed the brakes, looked again. Still nothing. My pulse hammered inside my ears. I told myself I was tired, overworked, seeing things. That was the logical explanation, the only explanation. Yet the image remained burned into my mind. I drove toward the town exit. The streets remained empty, dark, silent. Every house seemed asleep, but as I passed them, I noticed curtains moving. Tiny shifts behind windows. People watching. Not one or two. All of them. Every illuminated house. Faces hidden behind glass. Watching my vehicle leave. Watching the body leave. Watching me. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The town disappeared behind me. The road stretched ahead. Relief slowly returned. Then my radio crackled. Static filled the cab. I reached to turn it off. A voice emerged from the noise. Weak, distant, almost impossible to hear. "Don't bring him back." The static swallowed the words. Then silence returned. I froze. The radio remained dead. No signal. No active channel. Nothing. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Behind me, in the rear compartment, the body remained perfectly still. At least that's what I told myself. Because for the rest of the drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lying awake back there. And when I finally reached the county morgue just before dawn, I discovered something in the dead man's property bag that made my blood run cold. A photograph. Old. Faded. Taken sometime in the 1980s. It showed 6 residents standing beneath the Hollow Creek town sign. 5 of them were smiling. One was not. The elderly woman who answered the door. She looked exactly the same. Not older, not younger, exactly the same. And written across the back, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. He was the last one. Before sunrise. I convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. People see strange things when they're tired, especially people who spend their lives around the dead. That was what I told myself while staring at the photograph from Hollow Creek. The elderly woman, the 6 residents, the faded town sign, and those 4 words. He was the last one. The morgue was quiet. Most of the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The dead man from Hollow Creek rested inside refrigeration unit 3, exactly where I had placed him, exactly where he should be. I remember standing there with the property bag in my hand, looking from the photograph to the steel door of the refrigeration unit, back and forth, trying to decide why I felt so uneasy. Then my phone rang. The sound nearly made me jump. I answered immediately. It was Deputy Collins. I'd worked with him for years. Practical, level-headed, not the type to scare easily. "Morning," he said. His voice sounded strange, tight, like he'd been holding his breath. "Morning. You still at the morgue?" "Yeah." A brief silence followed. Then he asked something unexpected. "Did you run the deceased's identity yet?" I glanced at my paperwork. "Not yet." Another pause. "Do it." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Why?" "You need to see something." The line went quiet, not disconnected, just silent, like he was deciding whether to continue. Finally he spoke again. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Then he hung up. I stared at the phone. A bad feeling settled inside me, the kind that arrives before you know why. I walked to my desk and began processing the identification. Fingerprints, county records, death certificates, the usual procedure. At first, everything seemed normal. Then the system returned a match. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. The deceased wasn't just identified. He already had a death certificate, issued 10 years earlier. I checked the screen again. Same name, same birth date, same social security number, same person. Declared dead 10 years ago. Buried in Hollow Creek Cemetery. I felt cold all over. The room suddenly seemed too quiet. I printed the record. Then another. Then another. Each one confirmed the same thing. 10 years ago, the man had officially died. A local physician had signed the paperwork. A funeral home had handled the burial. The county had closed the case. Everything appeared legitimate. Everything except one problem. The man I had transported 6 hours earlier was physically lying inside my morgue. My pulse started climbing. I kept searching. The burial records included a plot number. Section C, Grave 14, Hollow Creek Cemetery. I stared at it. Then I looked toward Refrigeration Unit 3. A strange thought entered my mind. What if the grave was empty? I hated that thought immediately, because once it appeared, I couldn't get rid of it. The answer should have been obvious. The grave should contain human remains. End of story. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. 20 minutes later, Collins arrived. The moment he stepped into my office, I knew something was wrong. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, unshaven, distracted. I handed him the death certificate. He barely glanced at it. "I already know." That wasn't reassuring. "You've seen this before?" "No." "Then what?" Collins looked toward the moor hallway, making sure nobody else was nearby. Then he lowered his voice. "My grandfather used to live in Hollow Creek." I blinked. What does that have to do with this? His expression didn't change. He used to tell stories about that town. I sighed. Stories? I know how that sounds. He rubbed his forehead. He said people there believed the cemetery wasn't right. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded ridiculous. Collins didn't laugh. He wasn't joking. The smile disappeared from my face. What's that supposed to mean? He hesitated, then spoke quietly. They believe graves didn't stay full. The room felt smaller somehow. I stared at him. waiting for him to admit he was messing with me. He never did. Instead, he pulled a folded newspaper clipping from his pocket. 78 years old, retired mechanic, lived alone, the kind of man who looked like he'd spent his entire life outdoors. Sun-weathered skin, rough hands, sharp eyes. At least they had been sharp once. Now they looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. He kept glancing toward the windows, toward the parking lot, toward the road, always checking, always watching. It made me uneasy. Collins noticed it too. Walter wrapped both hands around a coffee mug. His fingers trembled slightly. Finally, he looked at us. I know what people think. Nobody said anything. I know how this sounds. I leaned forward. Just tell us what happened. For several seconds, he stared into his coffee. Then he spoke. I saw him on Highway 37. The room seemed quieter. He was standing beside the road. Walter swallowed hard. Middle of the night. I exchanged a glance with Collins. Highway 37. The road that ran north through Hollow Creek. The same road I had driven 2 nights earlier. Walter continued. I thought maybe he'd broken down. His voice sounded distant now, like he was reliving the memory. So I stopped. A waitress passed nearby. The clink of dishes briefly filled the silence. Walter watched her go, then looked back at us. He didn't move. What do you mean? He just stood there. Walter's hands tightened around the mug, not waving, not asking for help. I felt my pulse quicken. Then what? Walter looked directly at me. He was staring at the cemetery. The words lingered between us. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The cemetery? Walter nodded. Didn't even look at me. His face had grown pale. I called out to him. What happened? Nothing. The old man's breathing grew uneven. He just stood there. Collins shifted in his seat. What did he look like? Walter reached into his jacket. Then he pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. My stomach dropped immediately. The clipping contained the obituary photo from the dead man's funeral 10 years earlier. Walter pointed at it. That's him. The diner suddenly felt too warm, too crowded, too small. You're sure? Walter looked offended. I've lived here my whole life. His voice hardened. I know what I saw. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Walter added something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't alone. The words hit harder than I expected. What do you mean? Walter glanced toward the windows again. The nervousness returned immediately. They were standing behind him. Who? His eyes moved slowly back to us. The others. My mouth felt dry. The others from where? Walter's answer came almost as a whisper. The cemetery. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Walter pushed back his chair. Suddenly, abruptly, like he'd remembered something. I need to go. Collins frowned. We're not done. Yes, we are. Walter stood. The coffee remained untouched. His face looked terrified now. Far more terrified than when we'd arrived. Listen to me. His voice trembled. Whatever you're looking into. He paused, then lowered his voice. Stop. I stood. Walter. But he was already walking toward the exit. Fast. Too fast for a man his age. Within seconds, he disappeared outside. Collins and I exchanged a look. Neither of us liked what we'd just heard. Not one bit. But at least we had a witness. A real witness. Someone willing to give a formal statement. Or so we thought. 3 hours later, Walter Pierce vanished. Completely. His truck was found parked outside his house. The keys still inside. Front door open. Television running. No signs of struggle. No blood. No evidence. Just gone. As if he'd stepped outside and never returned. The sheriff's department launched a search immediately. Nothing. No footprints. No sightings. Nothing. By nightfall, another call came in. Then another. Then another. Everyone connected to Hollow Creek. Everyone connected to the dead man. A waitress claimed she'd seen him walking behind the diner after closing. A gas station clerk reported seeing him standing near Highway 37. A farmer claimed he watched him crossing a field at dawn. One by one, we began contacting them. One by one they disappeared. The waitress vanished before deputies arrived. The gas station clerk never returned home. The farmer's tractor was found abandoned in the middle of the field. No body, no clues, no explanation. By the end of the week, 4 witnesses were missing, 4 people gone, and all of them had seen the same man, the same dead man, the one whose grave stood empty, the one lying inside my morgue. Or at least he had been. That realization struck me around midnight. I was reviewing witness reports when a sudden thought entered my mind. The morgue. I immediately called security. No answer. I called again. Nothing. My heart started racing. 20 minutes later, I was speeding through town toward the county building. Rain hammered the windshield. Lightning flashed across the sky. The roads were empty. For some reason that bothered me. Everything bothered me lately. Every shadow, every unfamiliar face, every quiet road. By the time I reached the morgue, my hands were shaking. The parking lot was deserted. Only one vehicle remained, the security guard's car. I hurried inside. The building felt wrong immediately. Dark, silent, the front desk empty. No guard, no movement, nothing. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A low electrical buzz echoed through the hallway. I moved toward refrigeration unit 3. The closer I got, the worse the feeling became. Like something inside me already knew. The steel door stood partially open. My chest tightened. I stopped, just stared. The door should have been locked. It was never left open. Never. Slowly I pulled it wider. The metal hinges groaned softly. Inside was darkness. Cold air spilled out, and the storage tray was empty. The body was gone. For several seconds I couldn't move, couldn't think. The dead man had vanished. Exactly like the witnesses. Exactly like Walter. A sudden sound echoed somewhere deeper in the building. A door closing. Soft. Distant. I spun around. The hallway stretched empty behind me, yet the feeling returned instantly. The same feeling I'd experienced in Hollow Creek. The cemetery. The farmhouse. The road. Someone was watching me. I could feel it. Then I noticed something taped to the side of the refrigeration unit. A photograph. Old. Faded. My stomach dropped. It was another picture from Hollow Creek. More residents. More familiar faces. And standing among them was Walter Pierce, the missing witness. The photo looked ancient, at least 30 years old. Yet Walter appeared exactly the same age. Not younger, not older, exactly the same. My hands began to shake. Then I noticed the writing on the back. A single sentence, scrawled in dark ink. They only disappear after they remember. I read it twice, 3 times. Try and understand. Try and make sense of it. But the words only created a new question. What had Walter remembered? And why were all the witnesses vanishing before they could tell us? As thunder rolled outside, I looked down the empty hallway again. The building remained silent, still, watching. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something far worse than an empty grave. The people disappearing weren't random. Someone or something was removing them before they could reveal the truth. And whatever that truth was, it was getting closer to me. I didn't go back to Hollow Creek for 7 years. Not because I forgot, because I couldn't. Some places stay inside you. They settle somewhere deep and quiet. Then every once in a while, usually late at night, they remind you they're still there. Hollow Creek was one of those places. After the missing witnesses, after the empty graves, after the body disappeared from my morgue, the investigation slowly died. No arrests, no explanations, no answers. The official reports called everything unresolved. Witnesses were listed as missing. Evidence was archived. Files were boxed up. Life moved on. At least that's what everyone wanted to believe. Collins retired 2 years later. The sheriff who handled the case passed away. The old morgue was renovated. New staff arrived. New cases replaced old ones. But every now and then, usually during long overnight shifts, I would catch myself thinking about that photograph. The one showing Walter Pierce. The one where he hadn't aged. The one with the message. They only disappear after they remember. I spent years trying to understand what that meant. I never figured it out. Eventually, I stopped trying, or at least I pretended to. Then the phone rang, and Hollow Creek came back. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind of rain that turns roads black and reflective. I was sitting alone in my office, finishing paperwork. My retirement was only 8 months away. I remember thinking about that, about how close I was to finally leaving all this behind. Then my desk phone lit up. Dispatch. I answered. The operator sounded nervous. Young. Probably new. There's been a death notification. Okay. She hesitated, long enough for me to notice. Then she said the name. Hollow Creek. The pen slipped from my fingers. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Outside my office window, rain struck the glass in steady waves. I thought I had misheard her. Maybe I wanted to. What town? Hollow Creek. My stomach tightened immediately. The same feeling. The same cold pressure I remembered from years earlier. Who reported it? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? The call came through an old emergency line. I frowned. What old emergency line? The operator shuffled papers. Then her voice became even quieter. The one connected to Station 12. Every muscle in my body tightened. Station 12. That wasn't possible. Station 12 had been abandoned decades ago. Flood damage. Structural issues. Nobody worked there anymore. Nobody even visited it. Yet, somehow a death call had come through that line. I stared at the rain outside. Part of me already knew what was coming, and part of me wanted to hang up, to walk away, to let someone else handle it. But I couldn't. Not after 7 years. Not after everything. An hour later, I was driving north again. The same highway. The same dark fields. The same endless stretch of road leading toward Hollow Creek. Only this time I felt older, more tired, less certain. The rain followed me the entire way. Headlights cut through the darkness. Water rushed across the pavement. For miles I saw nobody. Then I reached Highway 37, and my hands tightened on the steering wheel, because I remembered Walter's story. The dead man standing beside the road, watching the cemetery, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. I found myself scanning the roadside, searching the darkness, expecting to see someone standing there. Nobody was. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from beyond the headlights. Something patient. Something familiar. The Hollow Creek sign finally appeared. It looked worse than before. The wood had collapsed almost completely. One side rested in the mud. The paint was gone. Only a few faded letters remained. Beyond it sat the town, or what was left of it. Most of the buildings had finally given up. Several storefronts had collapsed. Others leaned dangerously sideways. Nature was reclaiming everything. Trees pushed through sidewalks. Grass covered empty roads. The place looked dead, not abandoned, dead. And yet lights still glowed in a few windows, just like before. 3 houses, maybe 4, exactly enough to make the town feel alive, exactly enough to make it feel wrong. The address led me back to the same farmhouse. My pulse quickened immediately. I recognized it before I even turned into the driveway. The white paint, the porch light, the old truck. Nothing had changed, not one thing. 7 years. And nothing had changed. The rain tapped softly against my windshield. For a moment, I simply sat there, trying to convince myself to get out. Finally, I grabbed my coat and stepped into the storm. The porch creaked beneath my boots. I knocked once. The door opened immediately. My heart nearly stopped. The elderly woman stood there, exactly as I remembered her. Same gray hair, same face, same eyes. No older, no younger. Exactly the same. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, a small, sad smile. I wonder when you come back. A chill ran through me. You remember me? Of course. The answer came too quickly, too naturally, like she'd been expecting me. She stepped aside. The body is in the bedroom. The exact same words she'd spoken 7 years earlier. The exact same tone. The exact same expression. I followed her inside. The house smelled the same. The photographs remained on the walls. The furniture hadn't moved. Nothing had changed. Nothing. The realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. We walked down the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath our feet. Rain tapped softly against distant windows. The entire house felt frozen in time, like it had been waiting for me. The bedroom door stood open. I stopped at the threshold. The body lay on the bed, covered by a white sheet. For one brief moment, I felt relief. It was just another death, just another case. Then I pulled back the sheet, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. The face staring upward belonged to Collins, my friend, my former partner, the man who had stood beside me in the cemetery, the man who had spent years investigating Hollow Creek, the man who retired and moved 3 states away. I stumbled backward. My chest tightened. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Collins looked older than I remembered, but unmistakably him. There was no mistake, no possibility of confusion. I knew that face. The woman stood quietly behind me, watching, waiting. Finally I managed to speak. How? My voice sounded weak, broken. How is this possible? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the window, toward the darkness beyond the rain. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. He remembered. The room seemed to shrink around me. I turned slowly. What? Her eyes met mine. For the first time, genuine sadness appeared there. The others forgot. She swallowed. He didn't. 1,000 questions exploded through my mind. Where had Collins been? Why was he here? What had he remembered? And why had it gotten him killed? Then I noticed something in Collins' hand. A folded piece of paper. His fingers were wrapped tightly around it, as if he'd been holding it when he died. I carefully removed it. The paper was damp, worn, old. I unfolded it slowly. Inside was a photograph, one I had never seen before. A class picture. Dozens of children standing in front of a small schoolhouse. The date beneath the photo read 1978. My eyes moved across the faces, then stopped. My breath caught. There I was, a child, 9 years old, standing in the second row. My hands began to shake, because I had never attended school in Hollow Creek. I had never lived there. I had never even heard of the town until that first death call. Yet there I was, smiling beside children I didn't recognize. And standing at the edge of the photograph was the elderly woman, looking exactly the same. Not older, not younger, exactly the same. I turned the picture over. A message had been written on the back, not by Collins, by someone else. Someone whose handwriting I recognized immediately. My own. 3 words. Only 3. And seeing them filled me with a terror deeper than anything I had ever felt. Because I didn't remember writing them. I don't remember anything about that photograph, anything about that school, anything about that town. Yet the handwriting was mine, without question, without doubt. And the message said, "You left once." As thunder rolled across Hollow Creek, I slowly looked up from the photograph. The woman was gone. The bedroom stood empty. Only Collins remained on the bed. And for the first time in 7 years, I realized the investigation had never actually ended, because whatever happened in Hollow Creek, it had started long before my first visit. And somehow, impossibly, it had started with me. Case number 417 should have been forgotten by lunchtime. That's what bothered me most. I had worked as a county coroner for nearly 15 years by then. Most cases followed the same pattern. A call came in. I examined the body. I filled out paperwork. Then I moved on to the next one. Simple, routine, forgettable. Case 417 wasn't supposed to be any different. But even now, years later, I can still see that farmer's face every time I close my eyes. The call arrived just after sunrise. A local deputy found a deceased male near an abandoned farming township called Briar Ridge. The name meant nothing to me at the time. Most people in the county had forgotten Briar Ridge existed. A few empty houses, an abandoned church, maybe 6 permanent residents. The kind of place you drove past without noticing. The farmer had apparently been found lying beside an irrigation ditch. No signs of violence. No obvious cause of death. Just dead. The deputy sounded calm, almost bored, which made sense. At first glance, it looked like a heart attack. I expected another routine morning. I couldn't have been more wrong. The body arrived around 9. The transport team wheeled him into the morgue while I reviewed paperwork. Male, 59 years old. Name, Harold Madsen. Occupation, farmer. Marital status, widower. No known medical issues. No criminal history. Nothing unusual. I remember thinking he looked peaceful, almost comfortable, like he'd simply fallen asleep beneath the morning sky. His clothes were muddy, work boots covered in dirt, flannel shirt, denim jacket. Normal. Everything about him looked normal, until I saw his hands. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was seeing. His fingers were stained black. Not dirt, not grease. Something else. The discoloration stretched beneath his fingernails, deep inside the skin, as if he'd been digging through charcoal. I leaned closer. The marks looked old, not something from the previous day. Weeks old, maybe. That caught my attention. Farmers work with soil, not whatever this was. I made a note, then continued. The autopsy began shortly afterward. The morgue felt unusually quiet that morning. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air conditioning rattled softly through the vents. Everything felt ordinary, comfortingly ordinary, at least for a while. I started with the standard examination. Height, weight, temperature, external observations. Nothing concerning. Then I noticed something else. A scar, small, thin, barely visible, located just below the left ear. It looked surgical, precise, not accidental. I checked the medical records. No surgeries listed. No procedures. Nothing. Another note. Another question. Still nothing alarming. Then I rolled the body slightly to examine the neck. That's when I found the first symbol. I actually thought it was dirt at first. A faint shape near the base of the skull. Dark. Circular. About the size of a coin. I grabbed a cloth and wiped gently. The mark remained. Not dirt. Not ink. It appeared embedded beneath the skin itself. My stomach tightened slightly. The symbol looked deliberate. Geometric. Almost carved beneath the flesh. Yet there was no wound. No scar. No damage. Just a shape. Sitting there. Impossible. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then the phone rang. The sound broke the silence. I stepped away and answered. It was Deputy Rowan, the officer who found the body. "Anything strange?" he asked. I glanced back toward the examination table. "Maybe." A pause. Then he laughed softly. "Good." That wasn't the response I expected. "What?" Another pause. This one longer. Then he lowered his voice. Thought maybe I was seeing things. A cold sensation moved through me. "What are you talking about?" The deputy hesitated. "I found something near the body." I sat down slowly. "What?" "No idea." "Not helpful." "Describe it." For several seconds he remained silent. Then he finally spoke. There were circles. The room suddenly felt colder. What kind of circles? They were burned into ground. My eyes drifted toward the strange mark beneath the farmer's skin. I didn't say anything. The deputy continued. "About 20 of them." My pulse quickened. They surrounded the body. I leaned forward. "What do you mean surrounded?" "They were arranged in a ring." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The deputy sounded uncomfortable now, like he regretted calling. There was something else. Of course there was. "What?" "Footprints." I waited. The silence stretched. "Human?" "No." The answer came immediately. Too immediately. I rubbed my forehead. "What does that mean?" "I mean they weren't human." The line went quiet. Then he added something that stayed with me. "They came out of the field." My chest tightened, and they stopped at the body. A long pause followed. I already knew what he was going to say next. Somehow I knew. They didn't leave. The call ended shortly afterward. I sat alone for several minutes, staring at nothing, trying to convince myself the deputy was mistaken, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Then I returned to the autopsy. The moment I stepped back into the examination room, something felt different. At first, I couldn't identify it. Then I noticed the smell. Wet earth, fresh soil, strong enough to notice immediately. I looked around. The room was spotless. Nothing had changed, yet the smell lingered. Thick, unpleasant, almost like a freshly dug grave. The realization made me uncomfortable. I ignored it, or tried to. The examination continued. Then things became worse. Much worse. The strange symbol wasn't alone. There were more, dozens, hidden beneath the skin. They appeared gradually as I examined the body. One near the shoulder, another beneath the ribs, 3 more along the spine. All different, all connected somehow. A network of symbols buried beneath the flesh, like someone had tattooed the inside of his body. I had never seen anything remotely similar. Not once. Not in 15 years. Not in medical textbooks. Not anywhere. The deeper I looked, the more appeared. My hand began to sweat. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Then I discovered something impossible. One of the symbols moved, just slightly. A tiny shift beneath the skin. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. The room became completely silent. I stared at the mark, waiting. Nothing happened. Several seconds passed. Then the symbol shifted again. I stepped backward immediately. My heart pounded. Adrenaline surged through my chest. This wasn't possible. Bodies don't move after death. Not like that. I forced myself closer. Forced myself to examine it. The mark remained still. Motionless. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was catching up with me. That explanation felt comforting. Until I noticed something else. The symbol wasn't in the same position anymore. I checked the photographs I'd taken earlier. The difference was obvious. Small, but obvious. The mark had moved nearly half an inch. I stared at the images, then at the body, then back again. My mouth had gone dry. A sound echoed somewhere behind me. Soft, almost too soft to hear. A knock, 3 slow taps, coming from the morgue door. I turned immediately. Nobody stood there. The hallway beyond remained empty. The building was quiet, still, yet the feeling of being watched settled over me. Heavy and immediate. For the first time all morning, I felt afraid. Not because of the body, not because of the symbols, because something deep inside me was beginning to understand that this wasn't a normal death. Harold Madsen hadn't simply died near Briar Ridge. Something had happened to him. Something he carried inside his body. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Then I noticed one final detail. A folded piece of paper hidden inside his jacket pocket. I carefully opened it. The paper looked old. Much older than the farmer himself. Its edges were yellow. Fragile. Weathered. Only one sentence appeared on the page. Written in faded black ink. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Because I couldn't believe what it said. The message was simple, just 6 words. Do not open what is under Briar Ridge. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I had the terrible feeling Harold Madsen had opened it anyway. The symbols weren't supposed to exist. That was the thought that kept returning to me. Not during the autopsy. Not while I was taking photographs. Not while I was documenting evidence. It came later. That night, when I was lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I had seen, because no matter how many times I went through the facts, the same problem remained. Those marks were beneath Harold Madsen's skin. Not on it, not tattooed, not carved, not burned. Inside, as if they had grown there. And the deeper I looked into Case 417, the worse things became. The following morning, I returned to the morgue before sunrise. The parking lot sat empty, beneath a blanket of fog. Streetlights glowed weakly through the mist. Everything looked gray, muted, unreal. I sat in my car for several minutes before going inside. Part of me didn't want to continue. I told myself it was because I was tired, but deep down I knew better. I was afraid of what I might find. The moment I stepped into the building, that strange smell returned. Fresh soil, wet earth, the scent lingered in the hallways. Subtle, but impossible to ignore. I stopped walking. The morgue had always smelled the same. Disinfectant, Metal, cold air, never soil, never dirt. Yet somehow it was becoming stronger. I followed the scent toward examination room 2, the room where Harold's body remained. The door stood exactly where I left it. Closed. Locked. Nothing appeared unusual. Still, my pulse quickened as I stepped inside. The lights flickered once overhead, then stabilized. The room fell silent. Harold lay on the table, motionless, exactly as before. For a moment relief washed over me. Maybe yesterday had gotten into my head. Maybe exhaustion had exaggerated things. Maybe the moving symbol had been an illusion. Maybe. Then I saw the photographs. Every image I had taken the previous day remained spread across the workstation. I compared them to the body, and immediately my stomach dropped. The symbols had changed position. Not all of them, just enough. The circular mark beneath the neck sat slightly lower now. Another along the ribs had shifted toward the spine. A third appeared larger than before. I checked the timestamps, checked the measurements, checked everything. No mistake. The symbols had moved. I stood there for nearly a minute, frozen, trying to force logic into a situation that refused to accept it. Then someone knocked on the door. I nearly jumped. Dr. Benson entered carrying a coffee cup. He was our county medical examiner, older than me, experienced, the kind of man who never got rattled. If anyone could explain this, it was him. He noticed my expression immediately. "You look terrible." I laughed nervously. "Thanks." His eyes moved toward the photographs, then toward the body. "What do we have?" For the next 15 minutes, I explained everything. The symbols, the movement, the strange note, the circles found around the body, the footprints, everything. I expected skepticism, maybe even annoyance. Instead, Benson became unusually quiet. He studied the photographs carefully, longer than I expected. Then he leaned closer to the body. His confidence slowly faded. I could see it happening. Little by little, his expression tightened. His jaw stiffened. Finally, he looked at me. "Have you shown these to anyone else?" The question caught me off guard. "No." "Good." That answer bothered me. "Why?" Benson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and removed reading glasses. His hand seemed slightly unsteady. That was new. I had never seen him nervous. Not once. Then he said something unexpected. "I've seen one of these before." The room suddenly felt colder. "What?" His eyes remained fixed on the symbols. "Years ago." My heart skipped. "Where?" He swallowed. "A body recovered near Black Ridge." I stared at him. The name meant nothing to me. Another county. His voice sounded distant. 23 years ago. Questions immediately filled my mind. What happened? Benson remained silent, long enough to make me uncomfortable. Then he finally answered. The body disappeared. The words hung in the air. I waited for more. There wasn't any. Disappeared? He nodded slowly. From the morgue. A chill moved down my spine. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The memory clearly bothered him. Even now, 23 years later, what caused the symbols? Benson shook his head. We never found out. That wasn't reassuring. Neither was what he said next. The symbols weren't there when the body arrived. For several seconds I couldn't speak. My eyes drifted toward Harold, then back to Benson. "What do you mean?" His answer came quietly. They appeared afterward. The silence that followed felt unbearable. I looked down at the photograph again. The symbols, the circles, the impossible shapes beneath the skin. Suddenly I wasn't thinking about Harold anymore. I was thinking about time, about how long the symbols had been there, about whether they were still changing, growing, moving. A sudden sound interrupted my thoughts. A low crack, sharp, distinct. Both of us turned toward the examination table. Nothing moved. Everything appeared normal. Then another crack echoed through the room, this one louder. Benson stepped forward. I followed. The sound seemed to come from Harold's chest. For several seconds we simply stood there, listening, waiting. The room fell silent again. Then came the third crack. And this time I knew exactly what it sounded like. Bone. Something beneath the skin had shifted. Benson backed away immediately. I did too. Neither of us spoke. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of wet earth seemed stronger now, almost overwhelming. Then something impossible happened. A new symbol surfaced beneath the skin, right in front of us. Slowly, like ink spreading through water, a dark line appeared near Harold's collarbone. Then another. The shape formed piece by piece. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Within seconds, an entirely new symbol had appeared. One that hadn't existed moments earlier. I felt sick. Benson looked worse. His face had gone pale. What the hell is that? It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine fear in his voice. Before I could answer, the room lights flickered again. Once. Twice. Then darkness swallowed everything. My heart slammed against my ribs. The backup generators kicked in a few seconds later. Dim emergency lighting flooded the room. Everything turned red. The atmosphere changed instantly. Harold's body looked different beneath the crimson glow. The symbols looked darker, deeper, more alive. Then I noticed something on the wall. A reflection. At first I thought it was a shadow. Then I realized it wasn't. The symbols beneath Harold's skin were casting shapes onto nearby surfaces. Impossible shapes. Patterns. Connected lines. Like a map. My pulse quickened. I moved closer. The reflection stretched across the wall, across the floor, toward the far corner of the room. And there, hidden among the shifting patterns, was something else. A series of letters. Faint, barely visible. I squinted, trying to read them. Benson stepped beside me. Together we stared. The letters slowly became clear. B-R-I-A-R. Then another word. R-I-D-G. My mouth went dry. The symbols weren't random. They were pointing somewhere, showing something, communicating. The realization terrified me more than anything else, because symbols don't communicate, not on their own, not from inside a corpse. Then the emergency lights flickered again. The reflection vanished instantly. The room returned to normal. Only the symbols remained, silent, motionless, waiting. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Eventually Benson removed his glasses. His face looked exhausted, older somehow. Then he said something I never expected to hear. We need to find out what's under Briar Ridge. I looked toward Harold, toward the growing network of symbols beneath his skin, toward the impossible message hidden inside them. And for the first time, I realized the farmer might not actually be the victim in this story. He might have been trying to warn us, because whatever he found beneath Briar Ridge had followed him home, and now, somehow, it followed him into death. The first thing that bothered me wasn't the town. It was the fact that nobody seemed to remember it. Not the sheriff, not the county clerk, not even people who had lived in the area their entire lives. Yet somehow, every trail connected back to the same place, Briar Ridge. After the symbols revealed those words on the morgue wall, I couldn't stop thinking about them. Neither could Dr. Benson. The following morning, we met in the county records building. The sky outside was gray and heavy. Rain clouds hung low over town, the kind of weather that made everything feel older than it was. Benson looked exhausted. I probably looked worse. Neither of us had slept much. We spent hours searching property records, land surveys, historical maps, tax documents, anything connected to Briar Ridge. At first, everything looked normal. The township existed. The farmland existed. The roads existed. But then the records started becoming strange. Very strange. Entire sections were missing. Pages had been removed. Files stopped abruptly. One document would mention 6 families living nearby. The next would mention only 3. Another listed 22 residents. A later census listed none. It was as if someone had slowly erased pieces of the town over time. Not physically. On paper. I remember sitting at a wooden table surrounded by stacks of dusty folders. The smell of old paper filled the room. The county clerk had stopped helping us hours earlier, not because she was busy, because she looked uncomfortable. Every time we mentioned Briar Ridge, her expression changed. A little tighter, a little colder. Finally, I asked her directly, "You've heard of it before?" She froze, just for a second, but I noticed, so did Benson. The woman slowly looked up from her desk. "I don't think that's a good place to discuss." The answer surprised me. "What does that mean?" She glanced toward the front windows, then toward the hallway, like she wanted to make sure nobody was listening. Finally, she leaned closer. "My grandfather talked about it." The room suddenly felt quieter. "What did he say?" Her face paled slightly. "He said people disappeared there." I waited, but she didn't continue. "That's it." The clerk swallowed. Then she shook her head. "No." For several seconds, she stared at the floor. "He said they came back." The word sent a chill through me. Benson sat forward immediately. "What do you mean?" The clerk looked uncomfortable now, regretful, like she wished she'd never spoken. "My grandfather said people would leave town." Her voice dropped lower. "Months later they'd return." I frowned. "That doesn't sound strange." She met my eyes. They weren't the same. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched. Finally, she gathered her things, closed the folder, then stood. "I shouldn't have told you that." And just like that, she left, leaving us alone with more questions and answers. That afternoon, Benson and I drove to the state archives 2 counties away. If Briar Ridge had existed, there had to be records somewhere, something official, something concrete. The archives occupied an old government building, tall stone walls, narrow hallways, rows upon rows of forgotten history. Hours passed. Then we found something. Not much, just enough. A map, old, yellowed with age, dated in 1964. I carefully spread it across the table. My pulse quickened immediately. There it was, Briar Ridge. But it wasn't alone. A second settlement appeared nearby, one I had never heard of before, one that didn't exist on modern maps. Its name sat printed in faded black letters. Ash Hollow. I studied it carefully. The town looked small, tiny even, maybe 30 buildings, one church, a school, a cemetery, a handful of roads. Nothing remarkable, yet something about it bothered me. Then I noticed the date. The town appeared on maps until 1972. After that, it vanished completely. No explanation, no record of relocation, no disaster reports. Nothing. The town simply disappeared from history. I looked at Benson. He was staring at the map too. Neither of us liked what we were seeing. We requested additional records. The archivist disappeared into storage. 20 minutes later, she returned carrying a thin folder, far thinner than it should have been. I opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings. Only 3. The first reported unusually high migration from Ash Hollow, residents leaving, businesses closing. Nothing unusual. The second mentioned abandoned homes, empty farms. Again, nothing alarming. The third clipping stopped me cold. It was dated October 1972. The headline read, "State orders evacuation of Ash Hollow." My heart skipped. Finally, an explanation. I quickly read the article, then read it again, because it explained absolutely nothing. No reason was listed. No emergency. No disaster. No contamination. Just an evacuation order. Mandatory. Immediate. The town was cleared within 48 hours. Then every official record ended. Just stopped, like someone had slammed the door shut. Benson noticed something before I did. A photograph attached to the article. Grainy, black and white. The image showed several residents standing near the town church. Most faces were impossible to identify, except one. I felt my stomach tighten. The man stood near the back row. Tall, thin, wearing overalls. At first, I thought it was Harold Madsen, the farmer, the dead man. But that couldn't be right. The photograph was over 50 years old. Then Benson pointed to the caption. The name beneath the image wasn't Harold. It was his father. I stared at the picture, then at the caption, then back again. The resemblance was nearly identical. And suddenly a disturbing thought entered my mind. What if Harold hadn't found something beneath Briar Ridge? What if he'd been looking for something? Something connected to his family? Something connected to Ash Hollow. By evening, we finally left the archives. The sky had grown dark. Rain had started again, heavy this time. As we walked toward the parking lot, Benson stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on something across the street. I followed his gaze. A man stood beneath a bus stop shelter, watching us. At least I thought he was. Rain poured around him, yet he never moved, never blinked, never looked away. Something about him felt wrong. Not threatening, just wrong. The feeling lasted only seconds. A passing truck blocked our view. When it passed, the man was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. Benson saw it too. I could tell. Neither of us mentioned it. Some things feel safer when left unspoken. The drive home was quiet. Dark roads. Steady rain. The rhythmic sound of windshield wipers. I kept thinking about Ash Hollow, the evacuation, the missing records, the symbols. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed the morgue. My stomach tightened immediately. I answered. It was one of the night staff. Her voice sounded shaky. Panicked. Doctor, you need to come back. I gripped the steering wheel. What happened? For a moment, all I heard was breathing. Then she whispered, the body. My pulse spiked. What about it? The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, she answered, and the fear in her voice was unmistakable. The symbols are gone. I looked at Benson. He immediately noticed my expression. What is it? I could barely speak. The woman continued. They disappeared. My mouth felt dry. All of them. Yes. That should have been impossible. Symbols don't vanish from beneath human skin. Not overnight. Not without leaving evidence behind. But the woman wasn't finished. Her next words were even worse. There's something else. I closed my eyes, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. What? The line crackled softly. Then she whispered, we found another one. The call ended shortly afterward. Neither Benson nor I spoke for the rest of the drive. Outside, rain hammered the windshield. Dark fields rolled past, endless and empty. And somewhere out there sat a town that officially didn't exist anymore. A town erased from maps, removed from records, forgotten by history, yet somehow still reaching into the present. Because if another body had appeared with those symbols, then whatever happened in Ash Hollow decades ago wasn't over. It had only been waiting. The photograph was waiting on my desk when I arrived. Nobody knew where it came from. That was the first problem. The second problem was much worse, because the face in that photograph belonged to a man who had been dead for over 40 years. I didn't know that yet. Not when I first picked it up. Not when I first looked at the image. At that moment, it just seemed like another piece of evidence connected to the second body. The body we found after Harold Madsen's symbols vanished. The body that had appeared in the morgue parking lot without explanation. No vehicle, no witnesses, no security footage. Just a corpse lying beside the employee entrance shortly before dawn. I remember standing there in the cold morning air. Police lights flashed across wet pavement. Rainwater pooled in the parking lot. Deputies moved around quietly. Nobody seemed comfortable. Nobody seemed eager to talk. The body belonged to a woman, early 60s, gray hair, thin frame, no visible injuries, no identification, nothing unusual, at least at first. Then they found the photograph in her coat pocket, and somehow it ended up on my desk. I sat down slowly. The image was old, very old, black and white, creased down the center. The edges were worn smooth from years of handling. It showed 6 people standing in front of a small wooden building, a general store. At least that's what it looked like. The sign above the entrance was faded, barely readable, but one word remained visible. Ash. My stomach tightened immediately. Ash Hollow, the forgotten town. The town erased from maps. The town connected to Harold, connected to the symbols, connected to everything. I looked more closely. The 6 people stood shoulder to shoulder. 3 women, 3 men, all smiling, all appearing perfectly normal. Then I noticed a face in the center, Something about him felt familiar. Not familiar in the usual sense. Not like someone I'd met. More like someone I'd seen before. My eyes remained fixed on him. Dark hair, sharp features, thin smile, plain work clothes. Nothing remarkable. Yet the feeling wouldn't go away. I knew that face. Somehow, somewhere. Then I realized where. The archives. The old newspaper photograph. The evacuation article. The man standing near the church. Harold Madsen's father. The realization hit me immediately. I grabbed the archive copies from my filing cabinet, spread everything across the desk, compared the images side by side. My pulse quickened. Same face, same eyes, same jawline. No question, it was him. The only problem was the date. The photograph in the woman's pocket had no date. The newspaper clipping did, more than 50 years earlier. I sat back, trying to think, trying to understand. Then another detail caught my attention. The people surrounding him. I had seen one of them before too. The woman standing near the left side. Gray coat, dark hair, nervous smile. Something about her felt familiar. I couldn't place it. Not immediately. Then the answer arrived. Like ice water poured directly into my chest. The second body. The woman found in our parking lot. I grabbed the intake photograph. Compared it to the image. For several seconds I couldn't move. The resemblance wasn't similar. It wasn't close. It was exact. Same face. Same eyes. Same features. Exactly the same. Yet the photograph was at least 50 years old. That wasn't possible. No human being looks identical after half a century. Not without aging. Not without changing. But there she was. Unchanged. Frozen in time. The room suddenly felt colder. I immediately called Benson. He arrived 20 minutes later, still carrying coffee, still looking exhausted. The moment he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. What happened? I handed him the photographs. He studied them quietly. His expression changed almost immediately. Confusion, concern, then fear. By the end, he looked pale. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he placed the photographs down. Run identification. I already did. His eyes lifted. And I swallowed. No records. That wasn't unusual by itself. But what came next was, we couldn't identify her fingerprints. Benson frowned. Damaged. I shook my head. No match. His expression darkened. That was nearly impossible. Modern databases contain millions of records. Most people eventually showed up somewhere. Driver's licenses, employment records, medical records, tax records, something. But this woman didn't exist. No history, no paperwork, nothing. It was as if she'd never lived at all. Then another call came in, this one from the archives. The archivist we met earlier sounded nervous, almost frightened. She asked if we had visited recently. I told her yes. Then she said something strange. Someone came asking about you. My grip tightened on the phone. Who? I don't know. Not helpful. What did they want? The woman hesitated, then answered. They wanted the Ash Hollow files. A chill moved through me. What files? The same ones you requested. I exchanged a look with Benson. Neither of us liked that. When was this? Last night. The archivist lowered her voice. They knew your name. That bothered me immediately. Did you give it to them? No. The answer came instantly. Too instantly. I felt my stomach tighten. What did they look like? Silence. Then a shaky breath. They looked like the man from the photograph. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. The photograph? Yes. My pulse spiked. The one from Ash Hollow. I looked down at the image again. At Harold's father. At the man who should have died decades ago. The archivist continued. He looked exactly the same. The line suddenly felt very quiet. Very cold. That's impossible. I know. Her voice trembled. But he was there. The call ended shortly afterward. Neither Benson nor I spoke, because neither of us knew what to say. Eventually we returned to the second body. The autopsy should have provided answers. Instead, it created more questions. The woman's internal organs appeared healthy. No disease, no trauma, no poisoning, nothing. The cause of death remained unclear. Then I discovered something beneath her skin. A mark, tiny, hidden near the collarbone. My heart immediately sank, because I already knew what it meant. The symbols had returned. This time there was only one. Not dozens. Not yet. Just one. A small circular shape, dark and precise. Exactly like Harold's. I called Benson over. He stared at it silently. Neither of us looked surprised anymore. That was perhaps the most disturbing part. We were starting to accept impossible things. The symbol seemed almost harmless until we examined it under magnification. Then we noticed the lines. Tiny details hidden inside the shape. Letters, numbers, coordinates, actual coordinates. I felt my pulse quicken. Benson copied them immediately. An hour later, we plotted the location. The result left us speechless. The coordinates pointed directly toward Ash Hollow, not the town itself. Something nearby, deep woods beyond the old settlement, an area with no roads, no structures, nothing, just forest. Yet somebody or something wanted us to find it. That realization stayed with me all evening, long after Benson left, long after the building emptied, long after darkness settled outside. Around midnight, I found myself staring at the photograph again, the 6 smiling faces, the forgotten town, the impossible man standing at the center. Then I noticed something I had missed before, a reflection, hidden in the store window behind them, faint, almost invisible. I leaned closer. My heartbeat quickened. The reflection showed a 7th person, standing inside the building, watching the camera, watching the group, watching everything. The figure's face remained blurred, distorted, impossible to identify. Yet something about it felt wrong. Not because it looked threatening, because it looked familiar, painfully familiar. I grabbed a magnifying lens, moved closer, studied every detail. And when I finally understood what I was seeing, my blood turned cold. The face in the reflection was mine. Not similar, not resembling. Mine, exactly mine. The same eyes, the same features, the same expression. Standing inside a photograph taken decades before I was born. For several seconds I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The building groaned softly around me. And as I stared at my own face hidden inside that ancient photograph, one terrible question settled into my mind. If I had somehow appeared in a picture from 50 years ago, then maybe this wasn't a mystery about Ash Hollow anymore. Maybe Ash Hollow had always been waiting for me. I knew something was wrong before I answered the phone. It was 12:17 in the morning. The county morgue was quiet except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rattle of the air conditioning system. I had been halfway through paperwork when the phone rang. One call, then another, persistent, urgent, the kind of ringing that makes you stop whatever you're doing. I picked up on the 4th ring. Coroner's office. For a moment, all I heard was static. Then a man's voice emerged, weak, distorted, as though he were speaking from very far away. We need a transfer. I glanced at the clock. Midnight transfers weren't unusual, but something about his voice made me uneasy. Where from? The static crackled again. Then he answered, Highway 37. I frowned. That wasn't a town. It wasn't even an address. Just a road. What's the location? A long pause followed. Then, Hollow Creek. The name meant nothing to me. At least not then. Not yet. I pulled a notepad closer. What's the situation? Another pause. Longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded strange. Careful, like he was choosing every word. Unidentified male. I scribbled the information down. Cause of death. No answer. Only static. Then, unknown. The line crackled loudly. I nearly pulled the receiver away from my ear. When the sound faded, the man spoke again. Please come alone. The request immediately caught my attention. Why? Silence. I thought the call had disconnected. Then I heard breathing. Slow, uneven. Finally he answered. Everyone else already left. The line went dead. I sat there staring at the receiver. Something about that conversation felt wrong. Not alarming. Just wrong. Like I had missed something important. I checked the transfer request database. Nothing. No records. No notifications. No dispatch paperwork. That was unusual. Every transfer was logged. Every death report documented. Yet there was nothing connected to Hollow Creek. I should have called someone. Should have asked questions. Should have waited until morning. Instead, I grabbed my keys. An hour later, I was driving north through empty farmland. Rain had started sometime after midnight. A slow drizzle at first. Then heavier. The windshield wipers moved steadily across the glass. The roads were empty. Not a single vehicle passed me. No headlights. No taillights. Nothing. Just darkness. And the rain. The farther north I drove, the stranger things became. GPS signals started failing. Road signs disappeared. Cell service vanished completely. By the time I found Highway 37, I felt completely alone. The highway stretched through endless fields. Dark, silent, forgotten. I checked my directions again. Nothing loaded. The map screen remained blank. I muttered a curse and continued driving. A few miles later, I finally saw it. A wooden sign standing beside the road. The paint had faded almost entirely away. Only 2 words remained visible. Hollow Creek. The town appeared shortly afterward. At first, I almost missed it. A handful of buildings sat beyond the roadside, dark silhouettes beneath the rain. Most looked abandoned. Windows boarded up. Storefronts empty. Streetlights dead. The place looked less like a town and more like a memory. I slowed the vehicle. My headlights swept across empty streets. No movement. No people. Nothing. Then I saw a light. A single porch light, glowing near the edge of town. I followed it. The road eventually led to a farmhouse. Old, weathered, half hidden by overgrown trees. A pickup truck sat in the driveway. Its rusted body gleamed beneath the rain. The porch light swayed gently overhead. I parked beside the house. The engine died. Silence settled around me immediately. Not normal silence. The kind that feels heavy. The kind that makes you notice your own breathing. I stepped outside. Cold rain struck my face. The farmhouse seemed darker up close. Older. The paint peeled from the walls. The windows reflected nothing. I climbed the porch steps. There would creak beneath my boots. Before I could knock, the front door opened. An elderly woman stood inside. Gray hair, thin frame, pale skin. She looked tired, very tired, but not surprised, as though she had been expecting me. "You're the coroner?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Where's the body?" The woman stepped aside. Back bedroom. No greeting, no explanation, just those 2 words. I followed her inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and rainwater. Old photographs lined the walls. Most had faded beyond recognition. The floorboards groaned beneath our weight. Every sound seemed unusually loud. We reached the bedroom. The woman stopped. "The body is there." Then she walked away. Just like that, leaving me alone. I stood in the doorway. The room was dimly lit. A single lamp glowed near the bed. And there he was, the unidentified man, lying on top of the blankets, hands folded neatly across his chest. At first glance, he appeared asleep. Middle-aged, dark hair, weathered face. Nothing remarkable. I stepped closer. The moment I saw his skin, my stomach tightened. He was ice cold, far colder than he should have been, even accounting for death. The chill felt unnatural. I examined him carefully. No visible injuries. No blood. No trauma. Nothing. His clothes were dry despite the storm outside. That bothered me. The farmer who supposedly found him had reportedly discovered the body beside Highway 37 hours earlier. Yet there wasn't a single trace of mud on his boots. Not one drop of rainwater on his jacket. It looked as if he'd never been outside. I pulled out my camera and began documenting the scene. Flash, flash, flash. Each burst of light illuminated the room for a split second. Then darkness returned. The third photograph revealed something strange. A figure standing near the doorway. I spun around immediately. Nobody. The hallway remained empty. I stared for several seconds. Listening. Nothing. Just the sound of rain against distant windows. I told myself it was a shadow. A trick of light. Then I looked at the photograph again. The figure remained there. Tall. Thin. Standing perfectly still. Watching. A chill crawled up my spine. I quickly checked the room. Closet. Bathroom. Hallway. Nothing. No one. Eventually, I convinced myself the image was distorted. A camera error. An exposure issue. Something technical. Yet the uneasy feeling remained. I finished documenting the body. Prepared the transfer paperwork. Then wheeled the stretcher toward the front door. The elderly woman was waiting beside the entrance. Still silent. Still watching. I paused. Did you know him? Her eyes moved toward the body. For a moment, something changed in her expression. Sadness. Fear. Maybe both. Then she answered. Everyone knew him. The response confused me. What's his name? The woman looked directly at me. And for the first time that night, she seemed genuinely unsettled. He doesn't have one anymore. The words lingered in the air. I waited for clarification. None came. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant fields. The woman slowly opened the front door. Rain and darkness flooded the entrance. Then she spoke again, very softly, almost like a warning. Don't stop on Highway 37. I frowned. What? She looked toward the road, toward the darkness beyond town, then back at me. If you see someone standing beside the highway. She stopped, her voice trembling slightly. Keep driving. Before I could ask another question, she closed the door, leaving me alone on the porch, alone with the body, alone with the storm. I loaded the stretcher into the transport van, started the engine, and began to drive home. The rain intensified almost immediately. Visibility dropped. The highway vanished into darkness ahead. For several miles, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed someone standing beside the road. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. A man, motionless, half hidden by rain, facing the highway, facing my vehicle. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The old woman's warning echoed through my mind. Don't stop. I kept driving. The headlights swept over him for only a second. Yet that second was enough, because I recognized the face. It was the same face lying inside the transport compartment behind me. The same man, the same clothes, the same expression, standing alive beside Highway 37, watching me pass. I nearly slammed on the brakes, but when I looked into the mirror, he was gone. Only darkness remained. Just rain, just empty road. For the rest of the drive, I kept checking the rear compartment camera. The body never moved, never changed, yet something felt wrong, terribly wrong. And when I finally reached the morgue and opened the transport doors, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. The unidentified man's eyes were open, and tucked inside his folded hands was a piece of paper that had not been there before. On it, written in shaky handwriting, were 6 simple words. You should have stopped the vehicle. The paperwork said there were 4 bodies in the transport vehicle. I only had one. That realization didn't hit me immediately. At first, I was too focused on the note. The same note I had found folded inside the dead man's hands. You should have stopped the vehicle. I must have read those words 20 times. Maybe more. Every time I looked at them, they felt different. Less like a warning, more like regret. As if whoever wrote them wasn't threatening me. As if they were disappointed. The body remained exactly where I had left it. Eyes open, expression blank, cold as stone. I eventually forced myself to continue working. That was my job. No matter how strange a case became, paperwork still had to be completed. Evidence still had to be logged. Reports still needed signatures. Routine has a way of protecting you. It gives your mind something normal to hold on to. Something solid. Something real. At least that's what I told myself. Around 2 in the morning, I sat alone in the intake office, reviewing the transfer documents from Hollow Creek. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The building felt unusually empty. Most night shifts did, but that night felt different, like the silence was listening. I opened the transport file. The transfer request consisted of 3 pages. Nothing unusual there. County seal, authorization code, location details. Then I reached the passenger manifest. My eyes moved across the page. One line, then another, then another. I stopped, looked again, read it a second time. A cold feeling settled into my stomach, because according to the manifest, I hadn't transported one body. I had transported 4. For several seconds, I simply stared at the page, certain I was reading it incorrectly. The first entry listed the unidentified male from Hollow Creek. That made sense. The second entry did not. The name field was blank. The age field was blank. The cause of death field was blank. Everything was blank except one thing. Status, received. I frowned. The third entry was identical. The fourth as well. 3 bodies. No names. No information. Only a confirmation that they had supposedly been transferred. Transferred by me. I checked the intake bay immediately. The transport compartment remained empty except for the single body. Nothing else. No hidden stretchers. No storage trays. No evidence bags. Nothing. Just one corpse. Yet the paperwork insisted there had been 4. I returned to the office. Looked through every document again. The entries remained there. Clear. Official. Stamped. Approved. I wasn't imagining them. The paperwork was real. And somehow that made everything worse. Because paperwork doesn't accidentally invent 3 missing bodies. I picked up the phone and called dispatch. The night operator answered after several rings. Her voice sounded tired. I gave her the transfer number, asked her to verify the manifest. The silence that followed lasted longer than it should have. Finally she spoke. You said Hollow Creek? Yes. Another pause. Then, we don't have a Hollow Creek. I felt a chill. What? No town by that name. I sat up straighter. I was there 3 hours ago. More silence. Keyboard clicks echoed faintly through the line. Then she answered. There are no active communities named Hollow Creek in this county. My mouth felt dry. I looked at the paperwork again. The address remained right there, printed in black ink. Official. Verified. Yet dispatch insisted the town didn't exist. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Neither of us had answers. By 3 a.m, the storm had worsened. Wind pushed against the building. Tree branches scratched the walls outside. The morgue felt isolated, cut off from the rest of the world. I decided to review the vehicle cameras. Every transport van recorded both interior and exterior footage. If something strange had happened during the drive, the cameras would show it. At least that was a hope. I loaded the footage. The video began normally. Rain, dark highway, empty roads, the body secured in the rear compartment. Everything exactly as I remembered. Then the timestamp reached 1:43 a.m. The moment I passed a man beside Highway 37. My pulse quickened. I leaned closer. The headlights illuminated the roadside. The figure appeared, standing perfectly still, facing the road, facing me. Even through the grainy footage, I recognized him immediately. Same face, same clothes, same man, the dead man, alive, watching. I paused the video, zoomed in. The image distorted slightly, but another detail emerged. Something I hadn't noticed before. The man wasn't alone. 3 other figures stood behind him, half hidden in darkness, motionless, waiting. I felt my heartbeat quicken. The camera quality was poor. The rain made everything blurry, yet I could still see them. 3 people, standing in a line, watching the transport vehicle pass, watching me. I slowly looked back at the passenger manifest. For bodies, 1 recovered, 3 missing, a knot formed in my stomach. I didn't like where my mind was going. Not at all. The logical explanation was simple. Paperwork error, data corruption, human mistake. Except nothing about this case felt logical anymore. And deep down I knew it. The night continued. I tried focusing on the autopsy, tried focusing on facts, measurements, documentation. evidence, things that made sense. But the feeling never left. That sensation of being observed, of being accompanied. Around 4 o'clock, I walked into the storage hallway. The corridor stretched nearly 50 feet. Cold white walls, steel doors, rows of refrigeration units. I had walked that hallway thousands of times. Yet that night it felt unfamiliar. Different. The fluorescent lights flickered briefly, then stabilized. I continued walking. Halfway down the corridor, I stopped. A refrigeration drawer stood partially open. Just an inch. Nothing more. I frowned. That shouldn't happen. The drawers automatically locked. I approached carefully. The metal handle felt freezing cold. I pulled it open. The tray inside was empty. No body. No evidence. Nothing. Just cold steel. Then I noticed something taped to the inside wall. A small piece of paper, folded neatly. My hands suddenly felt numb. Slowly, I unfolded it. 6 words appeared in shaky handwriting. We were in the vehicle too. I stared at the message, my pulse pounding, my mouth dry. Someone was playing a sick joke. They had to be. That explanation felt weak, but it was better than the alternatives. Far better. I crumpled the note and headed for security. The guards reviewed surveillance footage immediately. 3 hours of recordings. Every hallway, every entrance, every room. Nothing. No intruders. No visitors. No movement. No one entering the refrigeration area. No one placing the note. No one opening the drawer. The footage showed exactly what it should have shown. An empty hallway. Yet somehow the note had appeared. The security supervisor looked uncomfortable. I probably looked worse. Eventually he left. The building grew quiet again, almost peaceful. For a little while, things felt normal. Then dawn began approaching. And that's when I made a mistake. I opened the passenger manifest one more time. One last look. One last attempt to find a rational answer. The page had changed. The first 3 entries remained exactly as before. Blank. Unidentified. Received. But the 4th entry was no longer empty. There was a name now. A single name. Typed neatly beneath the others. For a moment my brain refused to process it. Then reality caught up. And the blood drained from my face. Because the name listed on the manifest wasn't the dead man's. It wasn't a missing resident from Hollow Creek. It wasn't someone I recognized from any case file. The 4th passenger was me. My full name. My employee identification number. My date of birth. Every detail correct. Every detail official. And beneath my name, in the status field, one final word had appeared. Expected. I sat frozen in the silent office. Unable to move. Unable to think. Outside, the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon. The storm was finally ending. But as I stared at my own name on that impossible manifest, I realized something that terrified me more than anything that happened all night. Whatever was connected to Highway 37 wasn't following the dead man. It wasn't following the missing passengers. It wasn't even following Hollow Creek. It was following me. And according to the paperwork sitting on my desk, it expected me to come back. I heard the voice almost 40 miles from Hollow Creek. At first, I thought it was a radio. The transport vehicle was old. County budgets weren't exactly generous, and most of our equipment had seen better days. Electrical problems happened. Static happened. Strange noises happened. That was the explanation I chose, because the alternative was much worse. The road ahead disappeared into darkness. Rain drifted across the windshield. The yellow highway line stretched endlessly into the night. Behind me sat the unidentified body from Hollow Creek. Secured, tagged, dead. At least it should have been. The clock on the dashboard read 1:31 a.m. I had been driving for nearly an hour. Everything felt normal. Then the radio crackled. A burst of static filled the cabin. I glanced toward it. Nothing unusual, just interference. The sound faded. The silence returned. A minute later, it happened again. Static, longer this time, more aggressive. I adjusted the volume knob. The noise stopped immediately. Problem solved. Or so I thought. Another mile passed. Then I heard something underneath the static. A voice, very faint, almost impossible to hear. I frowned, leaning closer. The transmission crackled again. A few distorted words emerged, then disappeared. I couldn't make them out. The signal faded before I could understand anything. The radio eventually went silent, but a strange feeling settled into my chest. That uneasy sensation people get when something doesn't quite fit. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. The highway curved through open farmland. Dark fields stretched beyond the headlights. No houses, no gas stations, no signs of life, just empty land. I tried focusing on the road. Then the voice returned. This time it didn't come from the radio. It came from behind me. The sound was so quiet I almost missed it. A whisper, a single word, my name. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. The transport vehicle suddenly felt much smaller, much colder. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing, just darkness beyond the partition window. The body remained secured inside the transport compartment, motionless, exactly where it should be. I swallowed, forced myself to keep driving. Fatigue does strange things to the mind. Long shifts, dark roads, lack of sleep. People hear things. I had seen it happen before. Maybe it was happening to me. That explanation lasted about 10 minutes. Then the knocking started. 3 slow taps. Metal against metal. Clang, clang, clang. I nearly jerked the steering wheel. The sound came from the rear compartment. Clear, deliberate, impossible to mistake. I immediately pulled onto the shoulder. The vehicle rolled to a stop. Rain drummed against the roof. My pulse hammered inside my ears. For several seconds, I just sat there, listening. Nothing. The knocking had stopped. I grabbed a flashlight, stepped outside. Cold wind hit me immediately. The highway looked deserted. The darkness beyond the headlights felt endless. I walked toward the rear doors. Every instinct told me not to open them. Every instinct told me to get back inside and leave. Instead, I unlocked the compartment. The doors swung open. The cold storage area sat exactly as I had left it. One body, one stretcher. Nothing else. No signs of movement. No damage. No explanation. I exhaled slowly, embarrassed, relieved. Maybe something had shifted during transport. Maybe a loose bracket had rattled. That happens sometimes. I checked everything carefully. Nothing appeared wrong. Then I noticed something strange. The refrigeration display. The compartment contained 3 storage units. Compartment 1, Compartment 2, Compartment 3. Only the first compartment contained a body. The other 2 were empty, or at least they should have been. Yet the temperature display for Compartment 3 showed active occupancy. I stared at the screen. The green light blinked steadily. Occupied. That made no sense. The compartment had been empty all night. I knew because I checked it before departure. I walked over, pulled the handle. The drawer slid open. Empty, completely empty. Cold air drifted outward. No body, no equipment, nothing. The occupancy light immediately switched off. I frowned. Probably a sensor malfunction. I closed the drawer. The green light turned back on. Occupied. A chill crept into my stomach. I reopened it. The light vanished. Closed it. Returned. Opened. Gone. Closed. Returned. Something inside the refrigeration system believed the compartment contained a body, even though it was empty. I didn't like that. Not at all. I shut everything down and resumed driving. The road seemed darker now. The rain heavier. Every shadow looked wrong. Every mile felt longer than the one before. 30 minutes passed. Nothing happened. My nerves gradually settled. Then I heard laughing. Soft, distant, a man's laugh, coming from the rear compartment. I froze. The sound lasted only a second, then vanished. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I turned off the radio completely. The cabin became silent. Yet somehow that made things worse, because now there was no possibility of confusion, no static, no interference, no explanations. The next sound came clearly. 3 voices, whispering, low, unintelligible, like people having a conversation in another room. My pulse quickened. I checked the rear camera. The screen displayed the storage compartment. The body remained secured. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Yet the whispers continued. I increased the camera brightness. The image sharpened slightly. And that's when I noticed something. Compartment 3 wasn't fully closed. Just a fraction of an inch. I frowned. I knew I had secured it. I remembered checking it. Yet there it was. Slightly open. The gap was tiny. Barely visible. Still, it bothered me. I kept watching. The vehicle hit a bump. The camera shook. When the image stabilized, the drawer was closed again. Perfectly closed. My stomach tightened. I replayed the footage. Again. The result never changed. The drawer opened, then closed. On its own. I told myself it was vibration, road movement, mechanical failure. I didn't believe any of it. Around 2:20 a.m., the whispers became words. I heard them clearly this time. Not one voice. 3, all speaking together. All coming from compartment 3. My heart pounded. The words repeated several times before I understood them. Don't leave us here. I nearly slammed on the brakes. The voices stopped immediately. The silence afterward felt unbearable. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, unable to move, unable to think. Rain swept across the windshield. The darkness outside pressed against the glass. Then another voice spoke, different this time. Closer, much closer. It came directly from the passenger seat beside me. We're almost home. I turned so fast my neck hurt. The seat was empty. Of course it was empty. Yet the voice had sounded inches away, as if someone had leaned toward my ear. I forced myself to keep driving. Every mile became an effort. Every second felt wrong. Then the rear camera suddenly flickered. Static flooded the screen. The image disappeared, returned, disappeared again. When it stabilized, my blood turned cold, because compartment 3 was open, wide open, not partially, completely. The empty storage drawer extended fully into the compartment, and someone was sitting inside it, a figure, motionless, watching the camera, watching me. The image lasted only 2 seconds. Then the screen went black. I stared at it, waiting for the picture to return. It never did. By the time I reached the county line, dawn was still hours away. The storm continued. The road remained empty, and the voices had stopped. For a brief moment, relief began creeping back into my mind. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had happened was finished. Then the transport computer chimed. A routine notification appeared on the dashboard screen. Vehicle occupancy report. I almost ignored it. Then I looked closer. The report listed all refrigerated compartments currently in use. Compartment 1, occupied. Compartment 2, empty. Compartment 3, occupied. My chest tightened. I checked the timestamp. Current, live, updated seconds ago. I stared at the screen, then slowly looked toward the dark partition separating me from the storage area. Something sat back there. The vehicle believed it. The sensors believed it. And deep down, despite every rational thought screaming otherwise, I believed it too. Because just before the screen refreshed, a final message appeared beneath the occupancy report. Passenger awake. And from somewhere behind me, inside the sealed darkness of compartment 3, I heard someone gently knock 3 times. Clang, clang, clang. The photograph should not have existed. That was the first thing I thought when I saw it. Not because it was damaged, not because it was old, but because everyone in the picture was supposed to be dead. I stared at it under the bright lights of my office while rain tapped softly against the windows. The image had been recovered from inside the jacket pocket of the unidentified man from Hollow Creek. The same man I had transported down Highway 37. The same man whose body had somehow led me toward missing paperwork, impossible passenger records, and voices that should never have come from an empty refrigeration compartment. Yet somehow the photograph disturbed me more than all of that, because photographs don't lie. People do. Memories do. Records do. But photographs capture moments that actually happened. And the moment captured in that picture should have been impossible. There were 8 people standing together in front of a church. Men, women, children, all smiling, all looking directly at the camera. Behind them stood a wooden sign. Most of the letters had faded. Only part of the name remained visible. Hollow Creek. My stomach tightened. I looked closer. The image appeared ancient. The edges were cracked. The paper had yellowed with age. At least 50 years old. Maybe older. Yet the faces remained surprisingly clear. Especially one face. The unidentified man. He stood near the center, wearing the same expression. The same features, the same eyes, exactly the same. Not younger, not older, the same. I sat frozen, trying to convince myself I was mistaken, trying to find some logical explanation. Maybe it was a relative, a son, a grandson, someone who looked similar. Families often shared features. That happened all the time. But the more I studied the image, the less convincing that explanation became. Because beside him stood another familiar face, the woman from Highway 37, the one I had briefly seen in the rain, the one standing beside the road, watching my transport vehicle pass. She was in the photograph too, and she hadn't aged either. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. I flipped the photograph over. Something had been written on the back. Only 4 words. We never left. I immediately began researching Hollow Creek. For days, I had encountered strange references to the town, missing records, conflicting reports, people denying it existed. Yet every strange clue somehow led back there. This time I wanted answers, real answers. The county archives occupied the basement of the courthouse, dusty shelves filled with old newspapers, property records, and historical documents. Most people avoided the place. I spent nearly 6 hours down there, searching, digging, following every lead I could find. At first I found nothing. No Hollow Creek, no community records, no maps, nothing. Then I discovered something strange. A gap. Entire sections of county history seemed missing, as if someone had deliberately removed them. Years of documentation simply gone. That discovery bothered me more than finding evidence, because records don't vanish on their own. Someone had erased something. The question was why. Near sunset, I finally found a clue. A newspaper article hidden inside a damaged archive box. The headline immediately caught my attention. Fire destroys remote settlement. The article was dated 53 years earlier. I carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The story described a small community located near Highway 37. Population, 83 residents. Town name, Hollow Creek. My pulse quickened. I continued reading. According to the article, a massive fire had swept through the settlement during the early morning hours. The blaze spread rapidly. Buildings collapsed. Roads became blocked. Emergency responders arrived too late. The entire community was destroyed. Every resident was believed dead. 83 fatalities. No survivors. I read the article twice, then 3 times. Each time the same detail stood out. No survivors. Yet somehow the dead man from my transport vehicle appeared in a photograph taken before the fire and looked exactly the same 50 years later. I copied everything. Newspaper articles, maps, property records, every document I could find. By the time I left the courthouse, darkness had already fallen. The sky looked heavy with storm clouds. The air felt colder than normal. As I walked toward my car, something caught my eye, a figure standing across the street, motionless, watching me. For a moment my heart stopped. The silhouette looked familiar, too familiar. I blinked. A passing truck blocked my view. When it moved on, the figure was gone. The street stood empty. I drove home feeling uneasy. The photograph remained on the passenger seat beside me. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing at it, as if expecting something to change, as if expecting one of the faces to move. Nothing happened, yet the feeling remained. That sensation of being watched, of being followed. That night I dreamed about fire, not ordinary fire. This felt different. The flames moved strangely, almost deliberately, like living things. I stood in the center of Hollow Creek. Wooden buildings burned around me. Smoke filled the sky. People ran through the streets, screaming, calling for help. Then I noticed something strange. No one was trying to escape. They weren't running away from the fire. They were running toward the church. Dozens of residents, men, women, children, all moving in the same direction, as if answering a call. The church doors opened. The crowd entered. One by one, the last person to step inside was the unidentified man. Before entering, he turned, looked directly at me, and smiled. I woke instantly, covered in sweat. The clock beside my bed read 3:17 a.m. The room felt freezing cold. I sat there breathing heavily, trying to calm myself. Then I noticed something on my nightstand. The photograph. My stomach dropped. I had left it locked inside my office desk. Yet somehow it now rested beside my bed. I stared at it, unable to move, unable to understand. The image looked unchanged, until I noticed a number at the bottom corner, written in faded black ink. I immediately thought about the article. 83 residents, 83 deaths, no survivors. The coincidence felt impossible. The next morning I returned to work. I needed answers, real answers, the kind supported by evidence. Facts, documents, something solid. Instead, I found something worse. The autopsy report had changed. I knew it had changed because I personally wrote it. I remembered every line, every observation, every measurement. Now, there was an additional note at the bottom, one I had never written. Origin confirmed. Hollow Creek. Date of death. Unknown. Date of fire. Incomplete. I stared at the words. Incomplete. Not accidental. Not undetermined. Incomplete. As if the fire had never actually finished. As if something had survived. That possibility haunted me throughout the day. By evening, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to see Hollow Creek for myself. The real place. Not photographs. Not reports. Not dreams. The actual location. Using old maps from the archives, I traced the original road. Most modern maps no longer showed it. Yet the route still existed, buried beneath decades of neglect. A forgotten stretch of road branching away from Highway 37. I arrived shortly before sunset. The landscape felt wrong immediately. The trees grew unusually close together. The air seemed unnaturally still. No birds. No insects. No sound. Just silence. I followed the road for nearly 20 minutes. Then the remains of Hollow Creek appeared. My breath caught. Blackened foundations. Collapsed structures. Broken stone walls. The entire settlement looked frozen in time, as if the fire had happened yesterday instead of 50 years ago. Nothing had been rebuilt. Nothing had been reclaimed. Nature itself seemed unwilling to touch the place. The silence felt overwhelming. I walked carefully between the ruins. Every step stirred ash. Fresh ash. Not old. Not weathered. Fresh. As if the fire still smoldered somewhere beneath the ground. Then I found the church. The exact church from the photograph. Standing alone at the edge of town. Burned. Damaged. Yet somehow still standing. Its front doors remained closed. My pulse quickened. I approached slowly. The evening sky darkened overhead. Wind moved through the trees. For the first time all day, I heard a sound. Voices. Soft. Distant. Coming from inside the church. Many voices. Whispering together. The same way the passengers had whispered from compartment 3. The same way they had begged not to be left behind. I stopped moving. The whispers continued, growing slightly louder. Then I noticed something carved into the church door. 83 names. Every resident listed. Every victim. Every person who supposedly died in the fire. My eyes moved across the names. Slowly. Carefully. Until I reached the final one. The last name carved into the wood. Unlike the others, it looked fresh. Recently added. The wood beneath it still pale. Still clean. And when I read it, every bit of warmth left my body. Because the newest name on the church door wasn't one of the victims from 50 years ago. It was mine. And from somewhere beyond the doors, hidden inside the darkness of that burned church, I heard 83 voices softly whisper, "You're finally home." I knew something was wrong long before I opened the rear doors. The feeling had been growing for the last 20 miles. A pressure inside my chest. A quiet certainty. The kind you can't explain. The kind that doesn't come from logic. It comes from instinct. And instinct was telling me the transport vehicle was no longer carrying what I had loaded into it. The rain had finally stopped. A pale gray dawn spread across the horizon. The county morgue sat ahead of me at the end of a narrow access road. Normal, familiar, safe, or at least it should have felt that way. Instead, I felt like I was bringing something home. Something that had followed me all the way from Hollow Creek. The occupancy warning still glowed on the dashboard. Passenger awake. The message hadn't disappeared. No matter how many times I reset the system, no matter how many times I restarted the vehicle, it always came back. Passenger awake. My hands felt cold against the steering wheel. The final turn approached. Then the warning changed. The screen flickered once. Twice. The letters vanished. New words appeared. Arrival confirmed. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach because I had never entered a destination into the navigation system. The vehicle shouldn't have known where I was going, yet somehow it did. The gate to the morgue slowly opened. I drove inside. The facility looked empty. The parking lot sat silent beneath the early morning sky. No staff, no movement, no signs of life. For some reason, that bothered me. The world felt paused, like everything was holding its breath, waiting. I parked beside the intake bay. The engine shut off. The silence that followed felt enormous. I sat there for nearly a minute, just staring through the windshield, trying to convince myself to move. Trying to convince myself I was tired. That was all. Just exhausted, sleep-deprived, overworked, my mind searching for patterns that didn't exist. Then something tapped gently against the partition behind me. 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The sound came from the storage compartment. Not loud, not violent, just deliberate, as if someone wanted me to know they were still there. I slowly closed my eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs. The knocking didn't return. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I stepped outside. The morning air felt cool and damp. The sky continued brightening. Birds should have been singing. Traffic should have been moving. The world should have been waking up. Instead, everything remained strangely quiet. I walked toward the rear doors. Each step felt heavier than the last. The keys rattled slightly in my hand. I hated that. The shaking made me feel weak, uncertain, yet I couldn't stop it. The locks clicked open. I gripped the handle, took a breath, pulled. The doors swung outward, and the body was gone. For several seconds, I simply stared, unable to process what I was seeing. The stretcher remained exactly where it should have been. The straps remained secured. The evidence tag still hung from the side rail, but the corpse itself had vanished. Nothing occupied the stretcher. Nothing at all. An empty space where a dead man should have been. A cold sensation spread through my entire body. I climbed into the compartment, checked beneath the stretcher, checked every storage unit, every corner, every cabinet. Nothing. The body had disappeared, as though it had never existed, as though I had transported an empty stretcher across the county. Yet evidence remained. The restraints showed signs of use. The paperwork remained intact. The transferred documents still listed the deceased. The body had existed. I knew it had existed. The problem was simple. It no longer existed now. Then I noticed something else. Something lying where the body had been. A photograph. My stomach tightened immediately. I recognized it. The same old photograph from Hollow Creek. The one showing the townspeople standing before the church. The one that should never have existed. Only now it looked different. Very different. I picked it up carefully. The image had changed. The people were gone. Every single one. The church remained. The road remained. The buildings remained. But the residents had vanished. 83 people erased from the photograph. All except one. One figure stood near the church entrance. Alone, watching the camera. Watching me. My hands started trembling. Because the figure wasn't a dead man. It wasn't a woman from Highway 37. It wasn't anyone from Hollow Creek. The figure was me, wearing my work clothes, standing exactly where the others had once stood. I dropped the photograph. My pulse thundered inside my ears. That wasn't possible. The photograph was decades old, long before I was born, yet there I was, clear as day, standing in the center of Hollow Creek, smiling. The sound of footsteps suddenly echoed through the intake bay. I spun around. A security guard approached from across the lot. Relief washed through me immediately. Another person. Finally. Someone real. Someone normal. The guard looked confused. "Everything okay?" I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I realized something. His face looked familiar. Very familiar. Too familiar. I had seen him before. In the photograph, near the back row, one of the 83 residents. The same eyes. The same face. The same expression. Exactly the same. The guard continued approaching. "Sir," I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. The photograph lay beside my feet. I looked down, then back up. The guard was gone. The parking lot stood empty again. No footsteps, no movement, nothing, only silence. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I stepped backward, nearly losing my balance. Something wasn't right. Something was deeply wrong. Then my radio crackled. The sudden noise made me jump. Dispatch, a familiar voice. Calm, professional, normal. For a brief moment, relief returned. "County Coroner, please confirm delivery." I grabbed the radio immediately. "Negative," I said. "The body is missing." Several seconds of static followed. Then the dispatcher spoke again, except it wasn't the same voice anymore. The tone sounded lower, older, almost tired. "Body received." My skin prickled. "No," I replied. "The body isn't here." More static. Then, "Body received." The exact same words. No emotion, no variation. I stared at the radio. The transmission continued. "Body received. Body received. Body received." Again and again, over and over. The voice eventually began changing, multiplying. One voice became two. Two became five. Five became dozens. Men, women, children, all speaking together, all repeating the same phrase. "Body received. Body received. Body received." I switched the radio off. The voices stopped instantly. The silence afterward felt worse. I looked around the intake bay. The morning sun had finally begun rising. Golden light touched the buildings. Everything appeared normal again. Yet, deep down, I knew normal was gone. Whatever had happened on Highway 37 wasn't finished. Not even close. Then I noticed something attached to the inside wall of the transport compartment. A piece of paper. Fresh, white, clean. It hadn't been there before. Slowly, I removed it. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Inside was a list. 83 names. Every resident from Hollow Creek. The same names carved into the church door. I scanned them quickly, line after line, name after name, until I reached the bottom. A final entry had been added. Different handwriting. Fresh ink. Still wet. I felt all the warmth leave my body, because the list no longer contained 83 names. It contained 84, and the newest name belonged to me. Beneath it, someone had written a final note. The body was never the delivery. You were. I stood there staring at those words while the morning sun climbed higher above the horizon. The transport vehicle sat silent behind me. The morgue looked ordinary. The world looked ordinary. Yet none of it felt real anymore, because somewhere between Hollow Creek and Highway 37, something had mistaken me for one of its own. And the worst part was this. Deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I could no longer remember whether I had ever truly left that town at all. I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the folder. At first, it looked like a normal paperwork mistake. The county office made those all the time. Wrong dates, misspelled names, missing signatures. Nothing unusual, but this wasn't a mistake. It couldn't be, because every death certificate inside that folder belonged to someone who had already died over 50 years earlier. I sat alone in my office, staring at the stack. 37 certificates, freshly printed, freshly approved, freshly entered into the county system. The ink still looked new, yet every person listed on those pages was supposed to be long dead. My coffee had gone cold beside me. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Outside the office window, rain drifted across the parking lot. Everything felt ordinary, but the folder sitting on my desk felt like something that didn't belong in the world. I picked up the first certificate. Name, Samuel Grady. Date of death, 2 days ago. Location, Ash Hollow. I frowned. The name sounded familiar, very familiar. I opened the county archive database, typed it in. The results appeared immediately. Samuel Grady, declared deceased 52 years ago. Cause of death, fire. Location, Ash Hollow. I felt a chill run through me. Slowly, I picked up the second certificate, then the third, then the fourth. Every single name produced the same result. Every person had already died. Every person had been officially buried decades earlier. Yet somehow the county system had issued brand new death certificates for all of them, as if they had died again. I leaned back in my chair, trying to think logically. There had to be an explanation. Database corruption, administrative error, old records accidentally duplicated. That happens sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. Then I noticed something strange. Every new certificate shared the exact same time of death, 11:47 p.m. Not similar, not approximate, exactly the same. 37 people, one identical time, 11:47 p.m. My stomach tightened. That wasn't a clerical mistake. That was deliberate. Someone had entered those records intentionally. The question was why. I spent the next hour making phone calls. Most apartments had no answers. Some had never even heard of Ash Hollow. Others insisted the town no longer existed. That response came up repeatedly. Ash Hollow no longer exists. Eventually, I reached an elderly clerk named Martha. She had worked county records for nearly 40 years. The moment I mentioned Ash Hollow, she went quiet, completely quiet. For several seconds, I thought the call had disconnected. Then she spoke. Ash Hollow. Yes. Another pause. You shouldn't be looking into that place. I laughed nervously. Why? Her answer came immediately. Because every person who just ends up going there. The line went silent. Then she hung up. I stared at the phone. A strange feeling settled into my chest. The kind that appears when someone tells you something ridiculous, something impossible. Yet, somehow you believe them anyway. The rain intensified outside. Water slid down the windows. The office seemed darker than before. I looked back at the folder. 37 certificates. 37 dead people. Everyone connected to Ash Hollow. I decided to visit the archives. If answers existed, they would be there. The county basement smelled like dust and old paper. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness. Thousands of records. Decades of history. I spent nearly 3 hours searching. Most references to Ash Hollow had been removed. Not lost. Removed. Entire files were missing. Maps had disappeared. Property records ended abruptly. Photographs had been taken out of storage folders. Someone had erased the town, yet traces remained. Tiny fragments. Pieces overlooked by whoever had done the cleaning. Near the back of the archive room, I discovered an old newspaper clipping. The headline immediately caught my attention. Fire consumes isolated community. Date, 54 years earlier. Location, Ash Hollow. I carefully unfolded the article. The paper crackled beneath my fingers. According to the report, a fire erupted shortly before midnight. The cause remained unknown. Residents attempted evacuation. Most never made it out. Official death count, 37. Exactly 37. The same number as the certificates. I felt my pulse quicken. Then I noticed another detail. The fire started at 11:47 p.m. I slowly looked at the certificates again. Every victim had supposedly died at 11:47 p.m., exactly 54 years later. Not coincidence. Not error. Something else. Something far stranger. A cold draft moved through the archive room. I looked up. The far end of the basement seemed darker now, almost unnaturally dark. For a brief moment, I thought I saw someone stand between the shelves, watching me. The figure vanished when I blinked. Probably another employee. At least that's what I told myself. Yet my hand still trembled. I copied everything. The article, the records, the names. Then I headed home. Night had already fallen. The storm continued. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Everything looked distorted, unreal, as though the world had shifted slightly out of place. I couldn't stop thinking about Ash Hollow. The name repeated endlessly inside my mind. Ash Hollow, Ash Hollow, Ash Hollow. When I finally reached home, I found something waiting for me. An envelope. No return address. No postage. Just my name written neatly across the front. I frowned, picked it up. The paper felt damp, as if it had been left outside in the rain. Inside was a photograph. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Just a photograph. The image showed a small town. Wooden buildings. Dirt roads. A church. A general store. Simple. Ordinary. Except every structure appeared burned, blackened, destroyed, and standing in the center of the street were 37 people. Men, women, children, all staring directly at the camera. My pulse quickened because I recognized the faces. Every one of them appeared on the death certificates. The same people, the same names, the same victims. Yet the photograph looked recent, not 50 years old. Recent, as though someone had taken it yesterday. I turned the image over, for words were written on the back. They finally came home. I slept badly that night. The dreams began almost immediately. I stood in the middle of a burning street. Flames climbed the buildings around me. Smoke filled the sky. 37 people walked through the fire, not running, not screaming, walking calmly, silently. Each one carried a piece of paper, death certificates. The same certificates sitting inside my office. One by one, they passed me. None acknowledged my presence. None looked afraid, only sad, deeply sad. The final person stopped, an elderly woman. Her face looked familiar. Then I realized why. Martha, the county clerk. She held a death certificate in her hands. My death certificate. I woke instantly, my heart racing. The room was dark. The clock beside my bed read 3:11 a.m. For several seconds, I just sat there breathing heavily, trying to shake off the dream. Then I noticed something on the dresser. The photograph. The one from the envelope. I knew I had left it downstairs. Yet somehow it sat across the room, facing me. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I arrived at work early. The office remained empty. Most staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. That suited me fine. I wanted quiet. I wanted answers. Instead, I found another folder waiting on my desk. The office remained empty. Most staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. That suited me fine. I wanted quiet. I wanted answers. Instead, I found another folder waiting on my desk. My stomach dropped immediately. The same gray folder. The same county seal. Only thicker this time. Much thicker. I opened it slowly. More death certificates. Dozens more. Freshly printed. Freshly approved. Freshly entered. My hands shook as I flipped through them. 43 new names. All connected to Ash Hollow. All supposedly dead again. And every certificate listed the same time. 11:47 p.m. I felt cold. Very cold. Then I reached the final page. Unlike the others, the certificate wasn't complete. Several fields remained blank. Name, age, address, everything empty. Everything except one line. Location of death. Ash Hollow. And beneath it, a handwritten note had been added. The ink looked fresh. Still wet, as though someone had written it moments earlier. I leaned closer, read the message, then felt every bit of warmth leave my body, because the note said only one thing. We still need one more name. The first file appeared 3 days after the Ash Hollow certificates. No one admitted bringing it in. No delivery records existed. No clerk signed for it. It was simply there, waiting on my desk when I arrived, after finding that unfinished death certificate with a handwritten note. We still need one more name. I stopped believing in coincidences. Every strange thing felt connected. Every loose thread seemed to lead back to Ash Hollow. And now another thread had appeared. The folder was thin. Inside was a single property record. One address. Nothing else. No explanation. No sender. Just an old municipal building located 30 miles outside county limits. At first, the address meant nothing to me. Then I noticed a handwritten note clipped to the page. The same handwriting from the unfinished certificate. Neat, careful, almost elegant. It said, "The records never stopped." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I made a decision I probably shouldn't have. I drove there. The building sat alone at the end of a cracked road surrounded by dead fields. The sky hung low overhead. Gray clouds drifted across the afternoon sun. Everything looked colorless, abandoned, forgotten. The structure itself looked older than anything nearby. 3 stories, red brick, broken windows, a rusted sign hanging above the entrance. County Recorder's Office. At least it had been. Years ago, the place had officially closed decades earlier. I knew that much from county records. Nobody worked there anymore. Nobody maintained it. Yet someone wanted me to see it. I parked beside the curb. For several moments, I remained inside the car, watching, waiting. The building felt wrong. Not haunted, not cursed, just wrong. Like seeing a person standing perfectly still in the middle of a highway. Nothing supernatural, just something that shouldn't be there. Eventually, I stepped out. The wind carried the smell of rain. Tall weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. The front door stood partially open. That immediately bothered me. Abandoned buildings usually stayed locked or boarded, not open. Open meant someone had been here recently. I pulled my flashlight from the glove compartment and walked inside. The air felt cold, much colder than outside. Dust coated everything. Old desks, filing cabinets, stacks of paperwork. Yet beneath the dust, I noticed something strange. Footprints, fresh footprints. Not many, just enough to suggest recent activity. I followed them deeper inside. The building seemed frozen in time. Calendars from decades earlier still hung on walls. Coffee mugs sat on desks. Folders remained stacked neatly in offices. It looked less like abandonment and more like everyone had suddenly left, as though work had simply stopped in the middle of a normal day. The silence made everything worse. Every step echoed. Every breath sounded too loud. I reached the records room near the rear of the building. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into darkness. Thousands of drawers. Thousands of documents. A lifetime of paperwork. Most stood covered in dust, except one. A single cabinet near the center of the room. Its metal surface looked clean, almost polished, as though someone touched it regularly. I approached carefully. The label read, "Ash Hollow." My stomach tightened. Of course it did. Everything led back there. Everything. I pulled the drawer open. Inside sat hundreds of files. Far more than should have existed. Property deeds, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death records, tax records, school enrollment forms. Entire lives preserved on paper. The town wasn't erased here. It was documented in perfect detail. I began reading, and almost immediately found something disturbing. The records didn't stop. Ash Hollow officially burned down 54 years earlier. Yet documents continue for decades after the fire. Utility records, property transfers, census updates, new residents, new births, new deaths. The town continued existing on paper long after it supposedly disappeared. That made no sense. None. Unless somebody kept creating the records, or somebody kept living there. I spent nearly an hour going through files. The deeper I looked, the stranger things became. Many names matched those recent death certificates. People declared dead in the fire, yet their records showed years of activity afterward. Some lived another 10 years, others 20, a few nearly 40. Every document felt impossible. Then I found something that made my hands freeze. One file contained a photograph, the same photograph I had received anonymously, the burned town, the 37 residents standing in the street. Only this version showed more. A date, printed neatly along the bottom. The photograph wasn't 50 years old. It was taken 6 months earlier. I stared at it, trying to understand, trying to force reality into something logical. But logic was slipping away, because the people in the image should have been dead. Every one of them. Yet there they stood, looking directly at the camera. The longer I stared, the more uncomfortable I became. Their expressions looked wrong. Not threatening, not angry, expectant, as though they were waiting for someone, waiting for something. Then I noticed one final detail. A figure stood in the background, partially hidden near a burned building. Someone separate from the others. Someone wearing modern clothing. A dark jacket, blue jeans. Not part of the original photograph. Not part of the town. I leaned closer. The face became visible. My heart skipped. It was me. I dropped the photograph. The sound echoed through the room. For several seconds, I simply stood there, frozen, unable to breathe properly. The image had been taken 6 months earlier, yet I had never been there, never visited Ash Hollow, never stood in that street, never posed for that camera. And yet there I was, clear as day, watching from the background. A floorboard creaked somewhere behind me. I spun around instantly. Nothing. Only darkness. Only shelves. Only silence. Still, I knew what I had heard. Someone else occupied the building. I called out. No response. The silence felt heavier now. Watching. Listening. I gathered the photograph and continued searching. Part of me wanted to leave. A large part. But curiosity had become stronger than fear. I needed answers, even if those answers terrified me. Near the back wall, I found a locked office. The door carried no name, no label, just a brass keyhole. Oddly enough, the key sat inside the lock, waiting. I turned it. The door opened. The room beyond looked different from the rest of the building. Cleaner, maintained, recent. Someone had been using it. A lamp sat on the desk. Boxes lined the walls. Fresh paper rested in neat stacks. Then I saw the filing trays. Hundreds of documents. New documents. Many dated only days earlier. I picked up the nearest file. Death certificate. Ash Hollow resident. Issued last week. Another file. Death certificate. Issued yesterday. Another. Issued that morning. My pulse raced. These weren't old records. Someone was actively creating them. Here. Now. Inside an abandoned building. Then I heard the elevator. A distant metallic groan somewhere in the building. I froze. The recorder's office hadn't had electricity for years. Yet the elevator was moving, slowly, rising upward, floor by floor. The sound echoed through the structure. Clank, pause, clank, pause. Each movement seemed deliberate, patient, coming closer. I looked toward the hallway. Darkness filled the doorway. The elevator stopped. Silence followed. Then footsteps began. Slow footsteps. Approaching. I immediately shut off my flashlight. The room plunged into darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. The footsteps continued. Steady. Unhurried. Someone walked through the building as though they belonged there. As though they knew exactly where I was hiding. The sounds reached the hallway. Closer. Closer. Then stopped directly outside the office. I held my breath. Seconds passed. Maybe a minute. Maybe longer. I couldn't tell. Then a voice spoke softly from beyond the door. An old man's voice. Calm. Almost friendly. You're looking at the wrong files. My blood turned cold. The voice continued. The new names are downstairs. I remained silent. Terrified to move. Terrified to answer. Another long pause followed. Then came one final sentence. The next certificate already has your picture. Footsteps resumed, moving away, gradually disappearing into the darkness. I waited nearly 20 minutes before leaving the office. When I finally stepped into the hallway, nobody was there. The building stood empty, silent, abandoned, just as before. Yet one thing had changed. A new folder now sat on the floor outside the office door. Fresh, clean, untouched by dust. My name was written across the front, and beneath it, in the same careful handwriting I had seen before, were 4 words. File opened, awaiting completion. The first certificate with my signature arrived on a Thursday morning. I remember that because Thursdays were usually quiet. No major cases, no emergency calls, no late-night recoveries from distant roads. Just paperwork, routine work, normal work, the kind of day that lets your mind settle. At least, that's how it started. I walked into my office carrying coffee and found a single folder sitting in the middle of my desk. Nobody had mentioned it. Nobody had delivered it. It simply waited there, the same way the other files had appeared, the same way every strange thing connected to Ash Hollow seemed to appear, slowly, quietly, as if it had always been there. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Part of me already knew I wasn't going to like what I found. I sat down, opened the folder, and immediately spilled coffee across my desk, because staring back at me was a death certificate. Official, stamped, approved, signed. My signature sat at the bottom, perfect, identical to the one I used every day. The loops, the slant, the pressure marks, everything, except I had never signed it. For several seconds, I just stared, unable to think, unable to move. Then I picked it up, examined it closely. The signature wasn't copied. It wasn't scanned. It wasn't printed. Actual ink, actual pen pressure. It looked exactly like something I had physically signed. Yet I knew I hadn't. The certificate belonged to a woman named Clara Voss. Cause of death listed as smoke inhalation. Location of death, Ash Hollow. Day of death, 3 days earlier. I checked the county database immediately. No such case existed. No police report. No body recovery. No autopsy request. Nothing. The woman didn't exist in any modern records, but she did exist somewhere else. Inside the Ash Hollow files. I already knew that before searching. And sure enough, there she was. Clara Voss, declared dead 54 years earlier during the town fire. I felt a headache beginning behind my eyes. The same pattern again. Dead people dying twice. Impossible records. Impossible paperwork. And now impossible signatures. I told myself someone was playing a prank. A sophisticated prank. Maybe someone inside the county office. Maybe someone with access. That explanation felt weak, but it felt better than the alternatives. I gathered every strange certificate that had appeared over the past weeks. Then I laid them across my desk. One by one, the realization came slowly. Then all at once, every single certificate carried my signature. Not some of them. All of them. Dozens. Perhaps hundreds. I had been too distracted by the names and dates to notice before. Now the evidence sat directly in front of me. Every document bore my approval, as though I had personally processed each death. My hands began shaking, because signatures create responsibility. Legally, professionally, personally. If someone investigated those records, my name would be attached to all of them. Every impossible death. Every impossible victim. Every impossible certificate. I spent the rest of the day trying to prove the signatures were forged. I contacted a document analyst I trusted, a man named Howard, former state investigator, expert in fraud cases. I sent him copies. He called back that evening. His voice sounded strange, uneasy. "What kind of joke is this?" he asked. "It's not a joke." Silence followed. Then he sighed. "I compared them, and they match." My heart sank. "How closely?" Another pause. Then came the answer I didn't want. "Perfectly." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Howard continued, not just visually. "What do you mean?" "The writing pressure matches. The stroke order matches. The speed matches." I swallowed. "You're saying I signed them." "I'm saying whoever signed them writes exactly like you." The room suddenly felt much smaller, much colder. Howard cleared his throat. "Can I ask something?" "Sure. Why do all these certificates belong to dead people?" I never answered. I ended the call, then sat alone in silence. Outside, darkness settled across the parking lot. Most employees had already gone home. Only a few lights remained in nearby offices. I should have left. I should have gone home. Instead, I opened a folder from the abandoned recorder's office, the one with my name written across the front. I had avoided it since bringing it back. Part of me didn't want to know what was inside. Now I had no choice. Slowly I opened it. The contents nearly stopped my heart. Photographs. Dozens of photographs. All showing me. At first glance they seemed normal. Work photos. Office photos. Parking lot photos. Images taken from a distance. But the dates didn't make sense. Many were years old. Older than my employment records. Older than my medical records. Older than my driver's license. One photograph supposedly dated 20 years earlier, yet showed me exactly as I look now. Same age, same face, same clothes. No difference. I flipped through them faster. Each image carried the same problem. The years changed. I didn't. A strange feeling spread through my chest, like standing on the edge of a very high building. The certainty that something fundamental was wrong. Then I reached the final photograph. This one showed a desk, a recorder's desk, inside the abandoned municipal building. A man sat behind it, filling out paperwork, signing forms, approving documents. His face remained hidden, but I immediately recognized the signature. Mine. The date printed on the photograph made no sense. More than 50 years ago. Yet the person writing my signature appeared to be using it comfortably, naturally, as though it belonged to him. I slammed the folder shut. My breathing had become uneven. Nothing about this was possible. Nothing, yet evidence kept piling up, layer after layer, piece after piece. And every answer created two new questions. The office lights suddenly flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. I froze. The building had been experiencing electrical issues lately. That was a logical explanation, the normal explanation. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone stood nearby, watching, waiting. I checked the hallway. Empty. The parking lot. Empty. The offices. Empty. I was alone, at least physically. Back at my desk, I noticed something new. Another certificate. I knew it hadn't been there moments earlier. I would have seen it, yet now it rested atop the stack. Fresh paper, fresh ink, fresh signature. Mine. I grabbed it immediately. Read the name, then felt every muscle in my body lock. The deceased wasn't someone from Ash Hollow. Wasn't someone from 50 years ago. Wasn't a stranger. It was Howard, the document analyst. Date of death listed as tomorrow. I stared at the certificate. Again, trying to find evidence of a joke, a fake, a prank, but everything appeared authentic. The cause of death field remained blank. The location field remained blank. Only the date was completed. Tomorrow. My phone rang. The sudden sound nearly made me jump. Howard's name appeared on the screen. Relief washed over me instantly. Of course, he was alive. The certificate meant nothing. I answered immediately. Howard? No response. Only static. Soft. Constant. I frowned. Howard. Then a voice emerged. Very faint. Very distant. Not Howard's voice. My own. The words came slowly through the static. Broken. Distorted. Yet unmistakable. Stop signing them. The line disconnected. I stared at the phone. A cold sensation crept up my spine, because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The voice hadn't been a recording. It had sounded terrified. And somewhere deep down, I recognized that fear. It was the sound of someone who already knew what was coming. Someone who had seen the next certificate before it appeared. Someone who knew whose name would be on it. And as I looked down at the fresh stack of papers covering my desk, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Every certificate contained a signature. Every signature was mine, except the very last one. The newest certificate, the blank certificate, the one with no name yet assigned. At the bottom waited an empty line, as if someone or something was still deciding who would sign it next. The first thing that bothered me wasn't the bones. It was the date. I was halfway through my morning coffee when the sheriff's office called. They had found human remains in a field outside Ash Hollow, an old farming town most people only remembered because it still appeared on faded highway signs. The deputy sounded tired. Looks like somebody turned up a skeleton while repairing an irrigation ditch. At first, it sounded routine. Out in the county, Farmers found old things all the time: rusted equipment, animal bones, sometimes even forgotten graves from family plots that no longer existed on maps. But something in the deputy's voice stayed with me. By noon, I was standing beside a muddy trench under a gray sky. The field stretched for miles in every direction. Dead corn stalks rattled softly in the wind. The air smelled like wet dirt and rain. 2 deputies stood near the excavation site. Neither looked comfortable. The remains had been uncovered about 4 feet below the surface. Most of the skeleton was intact. The skull rested on its side, as if the person had simply lain down and never gotten back up. I crouched beside the trench. Something felt wrong immediately. Not supernatural. Not yet. Just wrong. The body hadn't been buried properly. There was no coffin, no clothing, no personal belongings. Nothing. Just bones. As if someone had wanted the person erased. I spent the next few hours documenting everything. Measurements, photographs, collection procedures, routine work. But then one of the deputies handed me something they had found near the remains. A metal wristwatch. Old, corroded, the glass face cracked. I carefully brushed away dirt. The hands had stopped at 11:37. For some reason, that number stayed in my head. 11:37. I slipped the watch into an evidence bag. The wind picked up. Somewhere across the empty field, a metal gate creaked. I looked toward the sound. Nobody was there. Just acres of abandoned farmland. Yet for a second, I had the strange feeling someone was watching us. The feeling disappeared quickly, but not completely. Back at the county morgue, I began the examination. The remains belonged to an adult male. Age estimate placed him somewhere in his 30s. No obvious trauma appeared on the skeleton. No fractures. No bullet wounds. No signs of violence. It should have been straightforward. Another unidentified set of remains. Another file. Another cold case. Then I ran the dental records. And everything changed. I still remember the silence in my office when the match appeared. The computer screen glowed against the dark room. One name, one missing persons report, filed 32 years earlier. The report belonged to a man named Thomas Weaver, missing since 1989. Last seen driving home through Ash Hollow after visiting relatives. His truck was never found. Neither was his body. The case eventually went cold, like hundreds of others. Except now his remains had suddenly appeared beneath a farm field. I leaned back in my chair. 32 years. Someone had been looking for answers for 32 years. I felt a brief sense of satisfaction. Maybe this family would finally get closure. Maybe this was one mystery, ending instead of beginning. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, I called Thomas Weaver's surviving relatives. His younger sister was still alive, 70 years old, living 2 counties away. When I explained who I was, she became quiet, very quiet. For several seconds, I thought the call had disconnected. Then she spoke. "You found him near Ash Hollow?" I frowned. "Yes." Another long silence. When she finally spoke again, her voice sounded different, smaller somehow, almost frightened. I hoped they'd never find him there. The word sent a chill through me. "Who?" She hesitated. "The people from the town." I looked down at my notes. What people? No answer came, only breathing. Slow, uneven. Then she said something I still think about. Ash Hollow should have disappeared years ago. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. That conversation made no sense. But over the following days, things became stranger. I started reviewing old records connected to the case. Police reports, witness statements, archived newspapers, anything I could find. And I noticed a pattern. Every mention of Thomas Weaver ended in the same place. Ash Hollow, not just where he vanished, where other people vanished too. Over several decades, at least 14 people had disappeared within 20 miles of the town. Some were travelers. Some were locals. Some simply seemed to vanish without explanation. None of the cases had ever been connected officially, but seeing them together created a disturbing picture. A cluster, a pocket of missing people, centered around one forgotten farming community. I drove there 3 days later. The town sat beneath a blanket of low clouds. Most of the buildings looked abandoned, peeling paint-covered storefronts. Broken windows reflected the gray sky. The main street was empty, not quiet, empty, as if people had left in the middle of their lives and never returned. I parked near the old grain elevator. The structure towered over the town like a rusting monument. Wind pushed dust through the streets. A loose sign swung back and forth somewhere nearby. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoed through the silence. I walked for nearly an hour. Only 3 people live there now, according to county records. I never saw any of them, yet the strange feeling returned. That feeling from the field, being watched. I couldn't explain it. Several times I looked behind me. Nothing. Empty streets. Boarded buildings. Silence. Then I found the old general store. Most of the windows were covered. The front door hung slightly open. I stepped inside. Dust coated everything. Shelves, counters, floorboards. Years of neglect. Near the back wall sat a cork bulletin board. Hundreds of papers remained pinned there. Advertisements, community notices, church announcements. I almost left without looking. Then one photograph caught my eye, a missing person flyer. The paper had yellowed with age. The photograph was faded, but I recognized the face instantly. Thomas Weaver. I moved closer. The flyer listed him as missing. Date, August 12, 1989. Underneath the photograph, someone had written something by hand. The ink had nearly faded away. 3 words. He came back wrong. I froze. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. Someone had written that decades ago. Why? What did it mean? I carefully removed the paper. The moment I did, another sheet fell from behind it. Then another. Then another. Dozens of papers slid onto the floor. Missing person reports. Photographs. Names. Dates. Faces. Some stretching back nearly 50 years. I knelt among them. Heart pounding. Every one of them connected to Ash Hollow. Every one. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air heavier. I gathered several documents and returned to my vehicle. The entire drive back, one question repeated in my head. Why had nobody connected these cases? The answer arrived sooner than expected. That night, I checked digital archives again, and something impossible happened. Several records I had reviewed earlier were gone, completely gone, not hidden, not moved, gone. Search results returned nothing. Files that existed that morning no longer existed. I refreshed repeatedly. Nothing changed. At first, I blamed a database error. Then I noticed something worse. The missing cases connected to Ash Hollow were disappearing one by one, as if someone was actively removing them, or as if they had never existed. My stomach tightened. I wasn't dealing with a forgotten cold case anymore. Something was wrong with the records themselves. The next morning, I unlocked the evidence room. The remains of Thomas Weaver rested inside a secured storage unit. Everything appeared normal for about 10 seconds. Then I noticed something sitting on top of the evidence container. A photograph. My blood ran cold. I had never seen it before. Nobody had logged it into evidence. Nobody should have been able to place it there. The image showed a group of people standing outside a building. The photograph looked ancient, maybe 50 years old, maybe older. Men, women, children, all staring directly into the camera. Behind them stood a wooden sign. Ash Hollow. I studied the faces, one by one. Then my breathing stopped, because standing in the center of the photograph was Thomas Weaver. Not as a missing man from 1989, not as a skeleton found beneath a field. He appeared exactly as he looked in his driver's license photo. The same age, the same face, the same expression. But the photograph itself was decades older than he should have been. I checked the back of the picture. A date had been written there. I stared at the number for a very long time. Thomas Weaver wasn't even born in 1958. Yet there he was, standing among strangers, smiling at the camera, like he belonged there. And in the far corner of the photograph, almost hidden behind the crowd, was another face. A face I somehow recognized. I just couldn't remember from where. Not yet, but I knew one thing. The mystery surrounding Ash Hollow was much bigger than a decades-old missing persons case, because the dead man we'd finally identified wasn't leading me toward answers. He was leading me towards something that should never have existed in the first place. And the deeper I looked into Ash Hollow, the more it felt like the town itself was waiting for me to arrive. The old woman looked at the photograph for less than 3 seconds before she closed the door in my face. Not slammed, not angry, just quietly closed it, as if she had suddenly seen something she wasn't supposed to. I stood on the porch staring at the peeling white paint. The photograph felt heavier in my hand now. The image of Thomas Weaver smiled back at me from 1958. A man who shouldn't have existed in that picture. A man whose bones had been buried beneath a field for over 30 years. Yet somehow he was standing among a crowd of people decades before he was born. The old woman had recognized him instantly. That much was obvious. And now she was hiding. I knocked again. Nothing. The house remained silent. Wind moved through the dead trees surrounding the property. Somewhere nearby, a screen door creaked slowly, back and forth, back and forth. The sound seemed unnaturally loud. I waited another minute. Then I heard movement inside. Slow footsteps. The door opened a few inches. One pail. I peered through the gap. "You need to leave." Her voice trembled. I held up the photograph. "Who is he?" The eye disappeared. More silence. Then she spoke again. "He never left." The word sent a strange chill through me. I lowered the photograph. "What do you mean?" The door opened wider. Not much. Just enough for me to see her face. She looked exhausted. The kind of tire that settles into someone over years. Not days. Not weeks. Years. "You people keep saying he disappeared." She glanced toward the road, then toward the empty fields. "He didn't." I frowned. Thomas Weaver vanished 32 years ago. "No." Her answer came immediately. "He stayed." A cold knot formed in my stomach. The old woman stepped outside. For the first time, I noticed how isolated the property was. The nearest house sat almost half a mile away. Beyond that, nothing but farmland and dying trees. Ash Hollow felt abandoned. Yet somehow she spoke as if people still lived here, as if the town hadn't died decades ago. "My name is Evelyn Mercer," she said quietly. "My family is the last family left." I followed her inside. The house smelled like dust and old wood. Everything looked frozen in time. Photographs lined the walls. Old furniture sat exactly where it might have sat 50 years ago. Nothing felt modern. Nothing felt alive. Evelyn led me into a small dining room. 3 place settings rested on the table. I immediately noticed something strange. Only one chair looked used. The other 2 sat untouched beneath layers of dust. Yet fresh plates had been arranged there. Fresh silverware. Fresh glasses, as if someone expected guests or residents. My eyes lingered on them. Evelyn noticed. "They still eat here." I looked at her. For a moment, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The expression on her face never changed. I slowly sat down. "Who?" Her gaze drifted toward the empty chairs. The others. The room suddenly felt colder. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to leave. Part of me wanted answers. The second part won. I placed the photograph on the table. "Tell me about Thomas Weaver." Evelyn stared at the image. For several seconds, she didn't speak. Then she reached out and touched the photograph with trembling fingers. "He arrived during the summer." "When?" "Every summer." I blinked. "What?" Her eyes remained fixed on the picture. "He always came back." The knot in my stomach tightened. The statement made no sense. None. Thomas Weaver had vanished once. Not every summer. Yet Evelyn sounded completely certain, like she was describing a neighbor or a relative, not a missing person. I spent the next hour talking with her. The conversation only made things stranger. According to Evelyn, Thomas appeared in Ash Hollow repeatedly over the years, never aging, never changing, always arriving alone, always leaving before winter. At first, I assumed she suffered from dementia, but then she started mentioning details, specific details, things that matched police records, things she couldn't possibly know, dates, vehicle descriptions, witness statements. Information never released publicly. Every time I caught her in something impossible, she answered calmly, like none of it was unusual. The deeper we talked, the less certain I became. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. The dead don't leave Ash Hollow. I laughed nervously, not because it was funny, because it wasn't. It was the only reaction I could manage. What does that mean? Evelyn looked toward the window. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the fields. The fire changed everything. There was again the fire. I had seen references to it before. Old newspaper clippings, missing records, whispers in interviews. But nobody ever explained what happened. Tell me about the fire. For the first time, fear appeared in her eyes. Real fear, not confusion, not grief. Fear. You should stop asking. I leaned forward. What happened? She shook her head. Slowly. No one who learns the whole story leaves. The room fell silent. Neither of us spoke. Outside, the wind had stopped completely. The stillness felt unnatural. Heavy, like the entire town was listening. Then came a knock. 3 soft taps. Everyone freezes when they hear something unexpected, but Evelyn didn't freeze. She looked relieved, almost happy. The expression terrified me, because the knock had come from the front door, and I hadn't seen anyone approach the house. The property sat in open farmland. There was nowhere to hide, no trees close enough, no vehicles, nothing. Yet someone had knocked. Evelyn stood. "Excuse me." I followed her into the hallway. The front door opened. Nobody stood outside. The porch was empty. The road was empty. The field stretched endlessly beneath the fading light. Yet Evelyn smiled, as if greeting an old friend. Then she stepped aside, making room for someone or something to enter. I felt my heartbeat quicken. She closed the door. The hallway remained empty, but the air felt different. Occupied. That is the only word I can use. Occupied. I kept expecting to hear footsteps, voices, anything. Instead, silence filled the house. Evelyn returned to the dining room. Without hesitation, she pulled out one of the dusty chairs. Then she sat another plate on the table, directly across from me. My mouth had gone dry. Evelyn, she looked up. He'll be joining us. The statement hit harder than it should have, because she wasn't joking, not even slightly. She genuinely believed someone had entered that house. Someone I couldn't see. I stood. My instinct screamed at me to leave. Immediately, yet another part of me remained frozen, because something strange had just happened. The untouched dust covering the empty chair had been disturbed. A fresh mark appeared across the seat, like someone had just sat down. I stared at it. My pulse pounded inside my ears. Evelyn calmly placed food onto the empty plate. Mashed potatoes, green beans, slices of roast chicken. The chair remained empty, but tiny impressions appeared in the cushion, slowly, one after another, as if invisible weight settled onto it. I backed away from the table. Every rational explanation in my head collapsed. I wasn't imagining it. The marks were real. I could see them. Evelyn glanced toward the empty chair and smiled. Then she said something that nearly stopped my heart. "Thomas, this is a coroner." The room felt impossibly quiet. My skin prickled. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a faint smell drifted across the room. Smoke, burned wood, burned flesh. The smell was weak, but unmistakable. I knew that smell. Anyone working around human remains knew it. The odor grew stronger. Evelyn's smile faded. She looked confused, then worried, very worried. "No," she whispered. The smell intensified. Suddenly, every light in the house flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. The old woman slowly stood. Something had changed. Even she could feel it. The confidence was gone. Fear replaced it. Real fear. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the front door, toward something I couldn't see. Then she spoke the most disturbing words I'd heard since arriving in Ash Hollow. "That isn't Thomas." The lights flickered again, harder this time. A picture frame crashed somewhere deeper in the house. Glass shattered. Neither of us moved. The smell of smoke became overwhelming, and somewhere upstairs, directly above us, slow footsteps began crossing the floor. Heavy, measured, deliberate. Evelyn's face had turned white, because whatever she had spent years pretending lived inside this town, she suddenly realized it wasn't what she thought. And for the first time since I met her, she looked truly terrified. The footsteps stopped directly over our heads. Then came a long scraping sound, like something dragging itself across the ceiling, searching, listening, trying to find us. And deep down, I already knew one thing. The remains we had uncovered in that field weren't the beginning of this mystery. They were a warning, one that had arrived 32 years too late. I didn't wait to see what was upstairs. The moment that scraping sound moved across the ceiling, every instinct in my body screamed the same thing. Leave. Now, Evelyn seemed to reach the same conclusion. She grabbed my arm so hard her fingernails dug into my skin. We have to go. The fear in her voice was real. Not the fear of an old woman telling ghost stories. The fear of someone who had spent her entire life pretending something wasn't dangerous until the moment it finally turned toward her. The house groaned overhead. Another slow footstep crossed the second floor. Then another, heavy, deliberate, like whoever or whatever was up there wanted us to hear it moving. Evelyn pulled me toward the front door. Neither of us looked upstairs. Neither of us wanted to. The smell of smoke filled every room now. It burned the back of my throat. The odor reminded me of old fire scenes, collapsed houses, charred remains, bodies recovered too late. Something about that smell felt familiar, not personally familiar, professionally familiar, like death itself had walked into the house. We stepped onto the porch. The evening air hit my face. For a second, relief washed over me. Then I noticed Evelyn staring toward the road. Her expression had changed. She looked horrified. I followed her gaze. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The road was empty. The fields were empty. Everything looked normal. Then movement caught my eye. A figure stood nearly 200 yards away, perfectly still, watching the house. I blinked. Another figure stood farther down the road. Then another. Then another. My stomach tightened. People, at least 6 of them, maybe more, standing motionless among the fields. Too far away to identify. Too far away to see their faces. Yet all of them faced the house, watching, waiting. Evelyn whispered something. I barely heard it. They never come this close. I turned toward her. What are they? She didn't answer. Instead, she hurried toward her truck parked beside the barn. I followed immediately. The figures never moved, never waved, never approached. They simply watched. That somehow felt worse. By the time we reached the truck, darkness had begun settling over Ash Hollow. Clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight. The entire town looked like it was sinking into shadow. Evelyn started the engine. Her hands shook. Neither of us spoke as we drove away. Only when the town disappeared behind us did she finally exhale. I stared out the passenger window. What happened here? The old woman kept her eyes on the road. The fire was an accident. My heart sank. I had suspected that. But hearing it spoken aloud felt different. More real. What was it? Evelyn swallowed. A cleansing. The word hung in the air. A cleansing. Not a fire. Not a disaster. A cleansing. I felt a chill run through me. Who were they cleansing? She hesitated, then answered, the town. The silence that followed felt endless. Eventually, she pulled into a small diner several miles away. The place sat beside an old highway, almost empty. Just a few truckers and a tired waitress. Normal people, normal lights, normal conversations. For the first time all day, I felt grounded again. Reality seemed solid here, not distorted, not twisted, just ordinary. Evelyn ordered coffee. Then she finally told me the story, at least part of it. According to her family, Ash Hollow had once been much larger. Hundreds of residents, thriving farms, businesses, schools, everything a small town needed. Then people started disappearing. 1 person, then 2, then 5, then dozens. Some vanished overnight. Others disappeared in broad daylight. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew where they went. Eventually, rumors began spreading. People whispered about hidden graves, secret burials, things happening beneath the town itself. Then came the fire, a massive blaze that destroyed most of Ash Hollow 50 years earlier. Official reports blamed faulty electrical systems, but according to Evelyn, the fire was intentional, started by people desperate to destroy whatever was hidden there. I listened carefully. The story sounded impossible. Yet after everything I'd already seen, impossible wasn't carrying much weight anymore. What was hidden? Evelyn stared into her coffee. I don't know. I believed her. For the first time since meeting her, I genuinely believed she was telling the truth. She didn't know. Nobody knew. Only fragments remained. Stories passed through generations. Pieces of something larger. Something buried. The word buried stuck with me, because that's exactly where my thoughts went. Buried. The remains. The missing persons. The hidden graves. The foundations beneath the town. Suddenly a possibility emerged. I leaned forward. Has anyone ever excavated Ash Hollow? Evelyn's eyes widened. No. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Almost like she'd been asked before. I studied her face. Why not? She looked away. Because every mayor refused. That got my attention. Every mayor? Over 50 years? That wasn't coincidence. That was deliberate. Something was being protected. Or hidden. The next morning I made several phone calls. Then several more. By noon I had enough support to request a preliminary excavation permit. Officially, I was investigating a missing persons case. Unofficially, I was chasing a feeling. A terrible feeling. The kind that grows stronger every time you ignore it. 3 days later we began digging. The excavation site sat near the center of Old Ash Hollow, beneath what had once been the town hall. The building itself no longer existed. Only the foundation remained. Concrete, stone, weeds, nothing remarkable, at least initially. The first day produced nothing. The second day produced nothing. The third day changed everything. One of the workers uncovered human bone fragments. Everyone stopped immediately. The site became a crime scene. Then another fragment appeared. Then another. Then another. Within hours, we realized we weren't looking at a single burial. We were looking at many. My pulse pounded as investigators expanded the excavation area. The deeper we dug, the worse it became. Skeletons emerged everywhere. Adults, children, elderly individuals. Dozens, some buried individually. Others stacked together, like discarded objects. No markers, no records, no names, just bodies. I stood at the edge of the excavation pit, staring downward. The sight made me sick, not because of the remains. I'd spent years around death. It was the scale, the sheer number. Nobody accidentally buried this many people. Someone had hidden them, systematically, for generations. Then another discovery surfaced, one that disturbed me even more. The burials stretched across multiple decades. Different clothing, different materials, different periods. Some remains appeared nearly a century old, others much newer. The cover-up hadn't happened once. It had happened repeatedly, year after year, generation after generation. The realization settled over me like cold rain. Ash Hollow wasn't covering up a tragedy. Ash Hollow was covering up a pattern, a continuous pattern. My phone rang shortly after sunset. It was a forensic lab. The technician sounded nervous. There's something else. I stared into the excavation pit. What? A long pause followed. Then she answered. We identified one of the remains. My stomach tightened. Who? The name that followed nearly made me drop the phone. Thomas Weaver. I closed my eyes. The world suddenly felt unsteady. That wasn't possible. We already had Thomas Weaver. His remains had been recovered from the field. His dental records matched. His identification was confirmed. Yet now another set of remains beneath the town carried the same profile, the same age, the same markers, the same identity. I slowly lowered the phone. Around me, floodlights illuminated the excavation site. Workers moved quietly through the darkness. The pit stretched below like an open wound. And for the first time, a horrifying possibility entered my mind. What if Thomas Weaver wasn't one victim? What if there had been more than one? The thought sounded absurd, impossible. Yet the evidence sat directly in front of me. Then one of the archaeologists called my name. I hurried toward the far side of the pit. The man's face looked pale, shaken. He pointed toward something partially exposed beneath the dirt. At first I saw only wood, then a shape, then letters. A door, an actual door buried beneath the foundation. Old, weathered, locked from the outside. My pulse quickened. The workers carefully cleared away more soil. More of the structure emerged. Stone walls, a staircase, an entire underground chamber hidden beneath the town. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to, because every person standing there understood the same thing. The graves weren't the final discovery. They were only the warning signs above it. Whatever Ash Hollow had been hiding for generations, we had just found the entrance. And judging by the fear on every face around me, none of us were certain we wanted to know what waited below. I should have turned back the moment I saw the floor plan, but by then it was already too late. The building at Mercy Flats wasn't supposed to have a basement. That was the first lie. The second lie was a map in my hand, clean, official, stamped with county approval, showing a level that never existed on any public record. And the third lie was the silence coming from beneath my feet. I stood in the ruined hallway with my flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. Dust floated in the beam like ash trapped in air that forgot how to move. The walls were half collapsed, paint peeled away like old skin. Mercy Flats had been abandoned for years, maybe decades, but the file I held said otherwise. Recent maintenance logs, recent access stamps, recent signatures, all signed by me. I looked down at the paper again. My name sat at the bottom of every page. Same handwriting, same crooked tilt on the last letter. My stomach tightened like something inside me was trying to pull itself backward through memory. I don't remember signing any of it. A sound broke the silence. Not above me. Below, a low metallic knock. Slow, patient, like someone tapping from inside a sealed container, waiting to see if the world still remembered them. My flashlight dipped toward the floorboards. Old wood, reinforced in sections with newer steel plates that didn't fit the building age. Nothing here fit anything anymore. Another knock came, closer this time. I took a step back before I even realized I was moving. My boots scraped dust across the floor, and the sound felt too loud, like the building was listening harder now. I followed the hallway deeper. That's when I found it. A door that shouldn't exist. No handle, no label, just a smooth slab of steel embedded into the wall, like someone had sealed something in a hurry and then forgotten it was still breathing. There was a keypad beside it. Brand new, too new. My fingers hovered near it without touching. The screen flickered on by itself. Access. Coroner clearance required. My throat went dry. I stepped back again, slow, careful. My radio hissed once, even though I hadn't pressed anything. Then a voice came through. Mine. Approved. I froze. It wasn't just my voice. It carried my exact tone. The same flat exhaustion I hear when I sign off after long nights. But I hadn't spoken. The keypad lit green. The door unlocked with sound like something exhaling after holding its breath for years. And then it opened. Cold air spilled out. Not normal cold. This was deeper. Industrial. Like the inside of a freezer that had been running since before electricity learned to behave. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave, to call it in, to pretend I never saw this place. But I was already too far inside the story. I stepped through. The door sealed behind me immediately. No slam, no echo, just a soft final click, like a lock deciding I no longer belonged to the outside world. The chamber beyond wasn't a basement. It was a corridor carved into something older than the building above it. Concrete walls stretched forward in a narrow tunnel, lined with pipes that pulsed faintly with condensation. The air smelled like metal and wet paper. And underneath it all, something else, like burned fabric, or memory that caught fire and never finished dying. My flashlight cut through the darkness in trembling arcs. Numbers were painted on the walls. Old ones first, then newer ones layered over them. Then 19, then 6, then nothing, just scratches, like someone had been counting down. I walked forward, each step echoing too clearly. The sound didn't fade like it should. It followed me instead, bouncing back slightly delayed, like the corridor was replaying my movements a second time. Then I saw the first door. It was open. Inside was a small room lined with metal shelves. On those shelves, folders, hundreds of them, each one tagged with a name. Some I recognized, some I didn't. Some had no names at all, just dates. And all of them had one thing in common, recent timestamps. I pulled one down. My hands were colder than the air around me now. Inside the file was a death certificate. Cause of death, unknown. Location, Mercy Flats, sublevel unknown. Signature, me. I dropped it immediately. The folder hit the floor with a soft slap that felt too loud in the quiet. My breathing started to change. Not faster, deeper, like my body was trying to inhale more than the room allowed. I backed out of the room. That's when I noticed the second door at the end of the corridor. It was slightly open, and something inside was moving. Not violently, not fast, just shifting, like a body trying to remember how to exist in a space too small for it. I walked toward it anyway. I don't know why. Maybe because fear had stopped feeling like a warning and started feeling like a direction. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside was a larger chamber. Cold lights flickered overhead in a slow rhythm, like the ceiling itself was struggling to stay awake. Rows of metal tables stretched across the room. Autopsy tables. But they weren't empty. They were arranged like something had just left them. Wet stains marked the steel. Straps hung loose. Instruments were still laid out in careful order, as if the last person who used them expected to return in a few minutes. My stomach turned. Then I saw the body, on the far table, covered in a thin white sheet. I didn't move for a long moment, because I already knew. Some part of me had known since I stepped inside. I walked closer anyway. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floor was learning my weight in real time. The sheet didn't move. No breathing. No sound. Just stillness, so complete it felt staged. I reached for the edge of the cloth. My fingers stopped midair, because I heard something behind me, a pen scratching paper. I turned slowly. A desk sat in the corner of the room, and I was sitting at it, not metaphorically, not symbolically. Me, same coat, same tired posture, same hands writing something I couldn't see. I stepped back so fast I hit the table behind me. The body on the slab didn't react. The other me didn't look up either, just kept writing, calm, controlled, like this was routine. I forced myself to speak. What is this? My voice cracked in the air. The writing stopped. Slowly, the other me turned his head. Not fully, just enough. And then he smiled. Not warmly, not human, like he already knew the ending and found it mildly inconvenient. He lifted the paper and held it toward me. I couldn't see the text from where I stood, but I didn't need to, because the body on the table shifted under the sheet. Just once, like it had finally heard its own name. I stepped forward without thinking. The sheet lifted slightly at the edge, as if something underneath was trying to see me back. And in that moment, I understood the worst part. Mercy Flats wasn't a place where people disappeared. It was a place where they were recorded after they were already gone. But not dead. Not exactly. Something else. The pen started writing again behind me. Faster now, like it had run out of patience. The air got colder. The lights flickered harder. And the body on the table slowly, impossibly, began to breathe. Just once. Deep, patient, familiar. Like it was waiting for me to finish my shift. The first thing they sent me was not a body. It was a sound file, just a single clip labeled Station 12 Archive Recovery. I shouldn't have opened it, because the moment I pressed play, I heard breathing. Not static, not wind, breathing. Slow, wet, close to the mic, like someone was leaning over the recorder from the other side. Then a voice whispered my name. I froze. The room I was sitting in suddenly felt smaller. The fan above me kept turning. but the air didn't move right anymore. I stopped the recording. That was my first mistake, because when I played it again, my name wasn't there anymore. Instead, I heard the sound of pages turning, and then a second voice said, calm and clear, Coroner review requested. Station 12 logs reopened. I looked at the email again. County seal, official request. Old jurisdiction stamp from a place that didn't exist anymore on modern maps. Hollow Creek flood zone. Abandoned 12 years ago. Entire town wiped out in a river surge. No survivors confirmed. No active records. So, why were they sending me new logs? I opened the attachment, and everything started to feel wrong. The file list was too long for a dead station. Emergency calls, body reports, death confirmations, all stamped with the same timestamp range. Midnight to 3:17 a.m. Every night, for 7 years after flood. That was impossible. I leaned closer to the screen. The first log entry was simple. Call 001, unknown male, highway edge. Dispatcher note. Caller insists he is already dead. I blinked. Already dead? I scrolled further. Call 014, house still lighted in flood zone. Dispatcher note. No power grid in area since evacuation. Call 029, child reporting from underwater. My stomach tightened. I closed my eyes for a second. Just a joke. Bad data corruption. Old archive damage. But when I opened them again, the cursor had moved. I didn't touch the mouse. It was already hovering over the next file, like something was guiding me. I clicked it. Audio playback started immediately. No buffer. No warning. Just sound. A radio crackle. Heavy rain. And then a dispatcher voice. Tired. Human. Female. Station 12. This is Dispatcher Miller. Go ahead. A pause. Then a man answered, but his voice didn't feel right. It was too flat. Too far away. Like it was coming through wet soil. I'm calling from the highway. Dispatcher. Sir, what is your location? Man, I'm already on the list. Silence. Then the dispatcher's breathing changed. Sir, what list? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, I heard something else in the background. Water. Moving water. Not rain. Deeper. Like something dragging itself under the surface. Then he spoke again. I can hear the others waiting. The dispatcher's voice cracked slightly. Sir, I need your name. A long pause. Then the man said something that made my chest tighten. Check station 12 logs. You already wrote me down. The audio ended. Dead silence. I pulled my headphones off so fast they hit the desk. My hands were slightly shaking. I told myself it was fake. Edited. Voice simulation. Anything. But then I noticed something on the screen. A new file had appeared. Call 000. Coroner review entry. My throat went dry. I didn't open it. At least not immediately. I stood up instead, walked to the kitchen, poured water I didn't drink. My reflection in the window looked too still, like it was waiting for me to stop pretending. When I finally came back, the file was already playing, even though I hadn't clicked it. And this time, the voice was closer. Not from speakers. From the room. Coroner review confirmed. I froze. The voice continued. Station 12 welcomes you back. I slowly turned my head. The room was empty, but the monitor flickered, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something behind my reflection. A dark corridor. Floodwater level markings on the walls. And a sign. Station 12 active status. Unknown. The screen went black. Then the file list refreshed itself. New entries were added. All dated today. All marked with my initials. I stepped back. No! I whispered. That's not possible. But the printer beside my desk suddenly turned on. I don't own a printer that should be connected anymore. It printed one page. Slowly, like it was thinking while it worked. When I picked it up, my hand went cold. It was a death report form, already filled. Name me. Cause of death. Unknown. Location. Station 12 archive room. Time of entry. Current. And at the bottom, my signature. Perfect. Accurate. Mine. Except I didn't sign it. A loud static burst came from my speakers. I turned around fast. The monitor was on again, but now it wasn't showing files. It was showing a live feed, a hallway, flooded, narrow, flickering emergency lights above waterline marks. And at the end of it, a door. The label on it made my stomach drop. Station 12, archive room. My desk chair creaked behind me, slowly, like someone had just sat down in it. I didn't turn immediately. I couldn't, because the speaker whispered again, right beside my ear, "You're already on duty." My breath stopped. The monitor showed the door at the end of the hallway beginning to open from the other side, and I realized something I didn't want to understand. Station 12 wasn't a place I was reviewing. It was a place that was reviewing me back. The first call came at 12:03 a.m. I know because I checked the timestamp 3 times. Not because I need to confirm it, but because I didn't want to believe it. The screen in front of me had been silent for hours. Old archive system. Station 12 recovery interface. Just rows of dead files from a town that no longer existed. Then the first new log appeared. Call 118. Flood zone edge report. Filed. Today, 12:03 a.m. I leaned closer without meaning to. That was impossible. The Hollow Creek flood zone had been wiped off the active emergency grid years ago. No power, no infrastructure, no personnel, no calls. And yet there it was. A fresh report. Right in front of me. I clicked it. A short audio file loaded instantly. No buffering. No delay. Like it had been waiting for me. A dispatcher's voice came through first. Female. Calm, but tired in a way that didn't belong to any living person. Station 12, log received. Proceed. Then silence. A man's voice answered. Not panicked, not confused, just present. I think I'm still inside the town. The dispatcher replied slowly. Sir, the town is no longer active. A pause. Then the man said something that made my throat tighten. It still answers when I call it. Static rushed through the speaker. Then the audio ended. I sat back in my chair. My hand was cold on the mouse. I told myself it was a corrupted file. Old audio layered with new timestamps. System glitch. But then the second call appeared. 12:07 a.m. Call 119. Resident report. House lights underwater. Filed today. My stomach dropped slightly at that word. Today. I didn't click immediately. Instead, I watched the screen like it might move on its own. It did. The file opened by itself. A different voice this time. A child. Small. Close to crying, but not fully there yet. My house is still on. Dispatcher voice, cautious. Where are you calling from? Child. From inside it. Pause. Then a soft sound in the background. Water. Slow. Heavy. Like something breathing through a flooded hallway. The dispatcher spoke again. Are you safe? The child answered without hesitation. I think I'm under it now. The audio cut. My chair creaked as I leaned back. My pulse was louder than the room. I stood up, walked to the window. Outside, everything looked normal. Street lights, empty road, quiet night. But my reflection in the glass looked slightly delayed. Just a fraction, like it wasn't keeping up with me anymore. When I turned back, another file had appeared. 12:11 a.m. Call 120. Multiple voices in flood zone. I didn't sit down this time. I stayed standing and clicked it immediately. This recording felt different. More noise, more pressure, like the audio itself was struggling to stay contained. Dispatcher voice. Station 12. Report the caller. Then overlapping voices. Not one, not two, many, all speaking at once. We are still here. We never left. The water remembers us. The dispatcher's breathing changed. I need one voice at a time. The voices didn't obey. They got closer instead. Closer to the microphone. Closer to me. Then one voice broke through the others. Clear, calm, familiar. It said my name. I stepped back so fast my chair hit the desk. No, I whispered, but the audio didn't stop. The voice continued. You signed the reports. Static exploded through the speakers. I grabbed the monitor cable and pulled it out. The screen went black. Silence for maybe 3 seconds. Then the screen turned back on, even without power. Another file had appeared. 12:15 a.m. Call 121. Coroner confirmation request. My mouth went dry. That title wasn't supposed to exist in this system. I didn't click it. I refused. I stepped away from the desk. 2 steps. Then the speakers turned on anyway. No file opened. Just sound. A single sentence. Soft. Clear. Right behind me. Confirm identity. I froze. The room felt smaller again, like the walls had moved closer while I wasn't looking. The voice repeated, confirm identity. My throat tightened. I forced myself to speak. I'm the coroner assigned to Station 12 Archive Review. Silence. Then the reply came. No. My heart stopped for half a beat. Then the voice continued. You are listed as recovered. I shook my head instantly. No, that's not. But the printer beside my desk suddenly activated. Paper started feeding through slowly, like it had been waiting for that exact moment. I walked toward it without wanting to. The page printed fully. 1 sheet. Clean. Official. Stamped. Case status update. Subject, me. Status, active recovery complete. Location, Station 12 archive level. Time of death, not finalized. My hands started shaking. That last line made no sense. Not finalized. That wasn't how death worked in any system I knew. The screen behind me flickered again. Another call appeared. 12:18 a.m. Call 122. Self-report. My breathing went shallow. I didn't open it. I couldn't. But the audio played anyway. This time, there was no dispatcher. Just my own voice. Calm. Flat. Exactly like I sound when I write reports after long nights. I am confirming entry into Station 12 archive system. I stumbled backward. The voice continued. I will proceed with cataloging remaining records. I shook my head harder. No, that's not me. But the voice didn't argue. It just kept going. There's still 12 unresolved entries. A pause. Then, I am one of them. The audio stopped. The room went completely silent again. Too silent. Even the fan stopped making sound. I looked at the monitor. New text had appeared on it. No active user detected. Reassigning role. My chest tightened. The system wasn't showing me logs anymore. It was assigning something. Replacing something. The chair behind me creaked again. But this time I didn't turn around immediately, because I understood something I didn't want to accept. The calls after midnight weren't reports. They were records trying to find someone still alive to file them. And now they had finally found someone willing to listen long enough to become part of the system. The record was still running when I opened the file. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Not the sound. Not the voice. Just the fact that the audio existed at all. The timestamp on the file read 3:17 a.m. Highway 37 time. 2 weeks after the flood maps said the town was gone. I leaned closer to the speaker, expecting static. Instead, I heard breathing. Slow, wet, like someone trying not to be heard, inside a closed room full of water. Then a voice came through. Please, don't send anyone else down here. I froze. The report label said, unknown caller. Mercy Flats Instant File 44B. Mercy Flats didn't exist anymore. At least, that's what every record told me. I checked the file notes again. My hands were already cold. Recovered audio from County Dispatch Archive. Source, flooded station relay. Signal looped through dead infrastructure. Dead infrastructure shouldn't record anything. But the voice was still there, and it wasn't done speaking. I can see them moving again, the caller said. A long pause followed, like they were listening to something right next to the microphone. Then a softer sound came through. Footsteps, slow, dragging through water, not rushing, not panicked, like whatever was moving knew it had time. I stopped the playback for a second, just a second. The silence of the room felt heavier than the audio. Then I hit play again. The caller's voice was shaking harder now. They're under the markers. I told them not to dig them up. I told them. Another pause, then something worse. A second voice, not on the line. not coming through the recorder cleanly. It sounded like it was inside the same space. Names stay where they're put. I pulled the headset off so fast it nearly snapped the cable. My chair hit the wall behind me. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the screen. There was no second channel open, no background feed, just one audio file, one voice, one impossible second voice. I told myself it was interference, old equipment, flood, damage, corruption. But my hand didn't believe me. It hovered over the mouse like it didn't trust my brain anymore. And I pressed play again. The call was crying now, not loudly, like they were trying not to be heard by something very close. "I didn't sign anything," they whispered. "I never signed anything. Why is my name on the list?" A sound followed, paper turning, slow, careful, like someone reading through files in a room that didn't have air. Then footsteps stopped, right next to the microphone. The caller whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." Silence, then breathing again. But this time, it wasn't the caller's. It was deeper, heavier, like lungs that had never learned how to fill completely. I paused the recording again. My throat felt tight. I checked the metadata for the third time. No origin location, no tower, no relay station, just Mercy Flats, a place erased from the county map after the flood breach. The town was declared unstable, then abandoned, then removed from emergency grids. But the audio sounded like it was recorded inside a room that still had walls. I leaned in again, one more time. Play. The caller's voice was almost gone now, like they were speaking from somewhere smaller. A crawl space maybe. They said the graves moved. They whispered. I didn't believe them. But I saw it. I saw the ground change. A faint scraping sound came through. Metal on wood. Slow. Deliberate. Like something trying to remember how doors worked. Then another voice came again. Closer this time. "You listed them wrong." My stomach dropped. That voice didn't come through the speaker. It came too clearly. Too present. Like it was speaking inside the same room I was in. I turned around instinctively. The office was empty. Just file cabinets. Dust. Old fluorescent hum. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. I looked back at the screen. The waveform on the audio file had changed. It was no longer flat lines and spikes. It was repeating patterns. Like breathing. Like something learning rhythm. The caller spoke again, barely audible now. "I can't leave. The road keeps ending behind me." That sentence stuck. The road keeps ending behind me. I had seen reports like that before. Survivors from flood zones describing roads that didn't match maps anymore. Routes that looped back into collapsed districts. But this wasn't a survivor report. This was a dead recording. And dead recordings don't move roads. The audio shifted again. A new sound entered. Water. Not rain. Not drainage. Standing water. Deep enough to reflect something moving above it. The caller whispered, "They're counting again." A pause. Then the count started. 1. Not from the caller. 2. Not from the caller. 3. Too close. I leaned back slowly, my pulse hitting my ears. The counting didn't follow a human rhythm. It wasn't steady. It was layered, like multiple voices counting from different distances, all slightly out of sync, like a crowd trying to become one voice and failing. Then everything stopped, except one voice. The first one, the caller. "I think I know what the list is," they said. Silence stretched. Then the final line came. And I remember exactly how it sounded, because it didn't feel like it was being said anymore. It felt like it was being placed, carefully, into a file that already existed. "It's not who died in Mercy Flats." A pause, long enough for the room to feel smaller. "It's who stayed behind when the town got removed." The recording ended, but the silence didn't. I sat there for a long time without moving, because I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The file wasn't labeled archived. It was labeled active, and beneath it, a second timestamp had appeared. 3:18 a.m. New input detected. No source listed. No user logged in. Just a single line of text appearing under the audio file preview. Play again. I didn't touch the mouse. But the audio started on its own. And this time, before the caller even spoke, I heard something else first. Breathing, right behind me. The audio file was already open when I returned. I swear I didn't click it. The cursor was just sitting there, hovering over final entry, like it had been waiting for me. The timestamp showed 3:19 a.m., 1 minute after the last recording ended. But this wasn't the same file anymore. This one had no label, no source, just a blank line where a title should be, and underneath it, my name. I didn't speak for a moment, because the room felt wrong again. Not empty, not quiet, just slightly ahead of me, like everything in it had already happened once. I pressed play. At first, there was nothing, no static, no breathing, no background hum, just silence stretched too long. Then I heard paper turning, slow, careful, like someone was reviewing a case file. A voice followed, my voice. I sat up so fast the chair scraped back. That sound alone felt too loud. The voice on the recording spoke calmly, too calmly, like I was explaining something I had memorized 100 times. This case is closed, it said. I felt my stomach tighten, because I knew that tone. That wasn't panic. That wasn't confusion. That was official voice. Report voice. The voice continued. Subject identified. Highway 37 incident file confirmed. I whispered without meaning to. That's not me? But the recording didn't stop. It kept going like it didn't hear me. Like I wasn't part of the system anymore. I have reviewed all evidence. My voice said, and there is no discrepancy in the manifest. The word manifest hit harder than it should have, because I remembered that list. The one that didn't match the bodies. The one that kept adding names. I leaned closer to the speaker, like distance could change what I was hearing. Then the recording did something worse. It shifted. A chair creaked in the audio. A door closed. And suddenly, it wasn't just my voice anymore. There were background sounds. An office. A real one, but not mine. The voice continued. I signed off on the final transport at 2:44 a.m. I froze, because I had never done that. I had never even been assigned Highway 37 before last week. Yet the recording sounded certain, like it was reading my past instead of my present. Then a second voice entered the file. A woman's voice. Calm, professional, doctor. Can you confirm the identity of the remains? My recorded voice replied instantly. Yes, unclaimed remains from Mercy Flats recovery zone. My breath caught. Mercy Flats again. That name was everywhere now. On files that shouldn't exist. In recordings that shouldn't remember. The woman spoke again. Then why does the database show living status updates? Silence. Not empty silence. Pressured silence. Like the room in the recording was holding its breath. Then my voice answered. System error. Flood archive corruption. But even as I heard it, I knew it wasn't true. It sounded like a lie I had already accepted. The audio shifted again. Pages turned faster now. More urgent. The woman's voice dropped slightly. Doctor, the subject is still reporting. My recorded voice paused. Just for a second too long. Then it said something that made my hands go cold. Impossible. The subject was processed. Processed. Not deceased. Not recorded. Processed. Like paperwork finished something that reality hadn't agreed to yet. I leaned back slowly. My throat felt tight, like I had swallowed dust, because I realized something I didn't want to say out loud. The recording wasn't just replaying my voice. It was continuing my job. Without me, the woman spoke again. Then who is updating the logs? My recorded voice didn't answer immediately. Instead, there was movement in the audio. A chair sliding. A file drawer opening. Then, a long pause. And finally, my voice said something different. Lower. Slower. Like it didn't want to be heard. Check the signature on file 44B. My heart stopped because I knew that file. The same one from the Mercy Flats audio. The one with the impossible recordings. The woman responded instantly. That file is corrupted. My voice replied, no, it's active. A sudden sound cut through the recording. Paper tearing. Then something like a stamp hitting paper. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking now, because I could see something I hadn't noticed before. The audio waveform wasn't random anymore. It was structured, like handwriting, like a signature being drawn in sound. Then the woman spoke again, quieter this time. "Doctor, your name is on the updated entry." My voice didn't respond right away. When it did, it sounded different. Not panicked, not confused, just tired. "No," it said, "it shouldn't be." A long pause. Then the chair in the recording scraped back. Footsteps. Slow. Approaching something. The woman whispered, "Doctor?" My recorded voice answered softly, "I need to review the original entry." Then the audio cut. Not ended. Cut. Like someone had stopped it mid-breath. I sat there without moving. The room felt colder than before. And for a moment, I convinced myself it was over. Just corrupted data. Looped emergency logs. Old archive failure. But then the screen changed again. Without me touching anything, a new file appeared. Same title format. Final entry. Continuation log. My name was still attached. But now there was a second timestamp. 3:20 a.m. and a third line underneath it. Auto-generated update active. I didn't want to press play, but my hand moved anyway. The recording started instantly. No delay, no silence, just my voice again. But this time it was closer, like the microphone wasn't in an office anymore, like it was inside a small enclosed space, a room without windows, or maybe a vehicle. My recorded voice spoke slowly, carefully, like I was explaining something to someone right in front of me. The subject is no longer contained. I felt my chest tighten. Contained, not transported, not stored. Contained. The woman's voice returned, but weaker now. Distant. "Doctor, were you?" My voice answered immediately. "I am still inside the system." A pause, then softer. "But I am no longer outside it." My breath hitched, because that didn't make sense. And yet it felt like the most honest thing I had ever heard. Then the recording did something new, something it hadn't done before. It changed perspective. Suddenly, there were sounds of rain, heavy rain, metal creaking, a vehicle engine idling, and something dragging outside. Slow, patient, like it wasn't in a hurry anymore. My recorded voice spoke again. "They are not moving the bodies anymore." A pause, because the bodies are already moving the records. A sharp sound hit the recording, like a door sealing shut. Then silence, not full silence. Breathing again, but this time it wasn't behind me. It was inside the audio, inside the file, inside the system. Then my recorded voice said the final line, and I remember it exactly because it didn't sound like a conclusion. It sounded like an instruction. "If you're reviewing this, you are already assigned." The recording stopped, but the screen didn't. A new field appeared beneath the file. Assignment status, confirmed, and below it, a location tag I had never seen before. Highway 37, active zone. I stared at it, not blinking, because Highway 37 was supposed to be under investigation. Not active, not alive, not continuing. Then my office lights flickered once. Just once. And in that single second of darkness, I heard it. Paper turning behind me. Slow, careful, like someone had just opened a file that contained my name.